Welcome, everybody, to the Week 12 recap, going over all the games on Thanksgiving, Sunday, Monday, and even Friday as well. I am wearing the MVP shirt jersey, Jalen Hurts.
I am also wearing the MVP shirt jersey, leader in the league in sacks with 13.5. That's right, we're only 12 weeks into it, and TJ Watt already has 13.5 sacks.
Amazing. And Jalen Hurts put on an absolute masterclass on Sunday against the, dare I say, lowly Buffalo Bills.
On one leg.
And so we're here to break down all the games in Week 12 and give our thoughts on the playoff picture, as well as MVP race and all the other awards that follow.
Yeah, so let's dive into it. The first game we had was the Detroit Lions at home versus the Green Bay Packers. And then we had what some people are calling the worst halftime show in history with Jack Harlow performing. It was a $50 budget. They literally took a ice rink from a high school. But before that, we had the Lions coming into this game that they really had a chance to take control of that division, but end up inevitably falling to the Green Bay Packers. Jordan Love putting on a show. And then another game, the Detroit Lions are struggling with turnovers. So do you see this turnover bug seeing as a learning opportunity for the Lions? And does this hurt them in the Super Bowl contention in your mind?
It doesn't necessarily change it. This is a divisional foe, and Jalen and Jordan Love, he has these games kind of similar to Sam Howell, where he has a tough game and then he bounces back. He's played really good football the last 3 weeks. The problem with the Lions that I have is when Jared Goff is basically their MVP. When he's playing at his best, and the last 2 years he has, they win a lot of games. But when he has 3 fumbles in this game and costs them a lot of opportunities, because they moved the ball pretty well, they ran the football really well, and when he wasn't fumbling the ball, they were moving it pretty well. And I think that if Jared Goff doesn't turn the ball over, they win this game. So really, their Super Bowl odds are based on the performance of Jared Goff. And if he doesn't play up to what he's capable of, like he has been playing all season, playing really good football, then this is going to hurt their Super Bowl chances.
Yeah, I think it will hurt their Super Bowl chances. And I do think that they can clean up the turnovers, use this as a learning opportunity. I thought they still had a chance to win this game. And it seemed like anytime they got a little bit closer in this game, it's like one step forward for the Detroit Lions, and then it would take 2 step backs in this game. But the interesting thing coming out of this game is Jordan Love had a little bit of a rough stretch. People were ready to give up on him and then bury him the past 2 games. And he had a couple games where he had multiple turnovers, and it was the Raiders game that was really just a bad one that was sticking in people's mind. But if you look at the stats, he has pretty much exactly the same amount of yards as Aaron Rodgers had, and he has the exact same amount of touchdowns that Aaron Rodgers had at this point in Aaron Rodgers' rookie year. And then Jordan Love has that at the same point in the season that Aaron Rodgers had. So
same record too.
Yeah, same record too. Does this give you a little bit of hope for Jordan Love going forward for the future?
Yeah, it's interesting. When it comes time to negotiate his contract, I don't think they pick up his 5th-year option. What they can do is maybe sign him to like a Geno Smith level deal, maybe a little less money, but give him a couple more years. Because you've seen flashes of it. He can move. When he does have the ball slinging at the best rate, you still have some nice receivers on that team. You have Romeo Doubs, who's been playing good football, Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, when he's on the field, has been playing well. So they have a nice little core there. Luke Musgrave also playing really good football. So I think you should give him another year. And then maybe if you want to draft a quarterback in the later rounds, you can. But I think he's shown that he can be that guy. This is really his rookie season. The problem is that he's entering basically his final year of his contract, and they got to figure out whether to keep him or not. I think they should.
Yeah. Do you think he's shown more than Daniel Jones has in his first 4 years of his career than Jordan Love has shown in his first 11 games starting for the Green Bay Packers?
Yes, I think that Jordan Love has shown that he can throw. So he's beaten Daniel Jones in that avenue, and he can move, and I think he's a modern day quarterback. So, give him another year. We always say like rookie mistakes are a thing, and his first 5 games, he played pretty poorly, missed a lot of open balls, but when he's on his game, he's a good quarterback.
Yeah, and the Green Bay Packers are very much alive in the playoff race, and they have some games coming up, and we'll break down what exactly their schedule is when we preview the playoff race coming up here, but I do think the Packers do have a chance to make the playoffs. Their defense is formidable. I mean, they still have good players all over the field, and I think they really are just another really good wide receiver away from being an elite team. And I think the market is going to really tell what they'll be able to offer Jordan Love, because I don't think you're going to see anyone offering him like $200 million. So if it is in like that $140 to $180 million contract, maybe over 4 or 5 years, then you could definitely sign Jordan Love. Or you could see Jordan Love maybe bet on himself, test the market a little bit. So do you think he'll kind of explore those options in free agency, or the Packers are going to lock him up long term?
If I'm them, like Geno Smith's contract is 3 years, $100 million. Same with Jimmy Garoppolo. So I think that a contract like that would be formidable, where he's paying, I think $30 million for Jordan Love is fair to kind of see what you have with him. Maybe, 60 to 70% guaranteed. So he has that financial security, and he also has that long-term comfort with the Packers. They know that, all right, they're going to spend at least next year on him. The year after, they can kind of feel things out and see if things begin to formulate for him, because he's shown those flashes, but I wouldn't go out and pay $140 million for him yet. Maybe give him like a 2-year deal. Kind of like, I also kind of compare Deontay Johnson's deal when he signed back in the day. I think it was 2 years, $48 million or something along those lines. Kind of a prove it deal where they can get out of the contract if they have to, but give him another year, because he's shown flashes. This is a great game that he played.
Yeah, he's definitely shown flashes, because there are moments where you look at Jordan Love and you see some of the throws that he was making in this game, fitting the ball in between double coverage, getting the ball downfield. And really early in the season, he was going through some growing pains, going through some rookie mistakes, and they seemed like they were really kind of holding back the reins for him in September. It was a lot of underneath stuff. They weren't trying to open up the playbook. And as they did try and push the ball down the field, open up the playbook for him, that's where you start to see him make some of those mistakes. But with that, it just comes under reps, because as much as you go through training camp and you have all of those reps in practice, it's not going to be the same as being in game. So the fact that people are just ready to jump off the ship with him yet, I wouldn't go there. I'm not at the point where Colin Cowherd is just like, no, Jordan Love sucks, time to get off of him. He's missing throws. It's like, no, you need those times in the game to be able to react and then learn from those moments. And it seems like he was able to take a step back, evaluate some of those turnovers, and then Matt LaFleur has honestly done a pretty good job with him.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think they've been able to implement him, kind of ease him into the playbook. And now it looks like the playbook's pretty open up at this point. You see him making those deep bombs to the players like Jaden Reed, like I mentioned, Luke Musgrave getting involved as well. So I think what they'll do in the draft is really focus on the defensive side of the ball, because if they can get a top 10 defense on that team, then that team is definitely a playoff team.
Yeah, and one thing we do know about the Green Bay Packers is they love drafting defenders. So that's something Green Bay typically drafts defenders first before they go to skill positions, but they are really good at drafting second-round wide receivers. We've seen them hit on Jordy Nelson. We've seen them hit on Greg Jennings before. We've seen them hit on Devontae Adams. We've seen them hit now on Christian Watson if he can stay healthy. Christian Watson finally is showing the past few weeks he's starting to get healthy. He's starting to get back into the offense, and he's really that maker break player. Him and Treylon Burks were two wide receivers last year that were rookies in and out of the lineup and kind of hurt. But honestly, Christian Watson looked really good with Aaron Rodgers last year. So I think give him another season with the Green Bay Packers, and then you can make a playoff push. So I really want to see Jordan Love in those must-win games when he has to lead them down the field. But they did a really good job in Pittsburgh when it looked like they were going to blow out. They at least came back, made it a game. And then in that Chargers game, I get it's the Chargers, but at home, playing up against a tough team that's been a perennial playoff contender in the AFC, they did a good job, especially you have Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack coming under pressure and then under fire. He was pretty good against the Detroit Lions, just making sure he didn't turn the ball over, he didn't blow the game, and he let that defense kind of take control, hand the ball off to AJ Dillon. And then Aaron Jones is currently hurt right now. I could see him being a piece you maybe move in the offseason. Aaron Jones is getting a little bit older now, so maybe a team that's running back needy and they're ready to contend right now. Maybe Buffalo makes a play for him next year, but that's also a guy you could probably move for some draft capital and reboot that team. But as far as the Packers, you got blown out at home versus the Detroit Lions this time, so they did a good job about reevaluating what went wrong in that game and the fact that they came out here, got 3 fumbles, stripped Jared Goff, and they didn't seem like the moment was too big for them on Thanksgiving. I thought the Packers did a really good job regrouping and then retooling, and then heading into November and December, they put themselves in a position to compete for a playoff spot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the Vikings loss definitely helps them as well. They're currently 5-6. We'll look at the schedule when we break down the playoff picture. But moving forward with them, I think that I like the idea of, dealing Aaron Jones. It seems like he's lost a bit of his step that he had last year. Doesn't have the same burst. He has battled injuries also. So I think that you could ship him off for maybe a 2nd or 3rd round pick for, like you mentioned, and then build around him. Maybe you can pursue someone like a T. Higgins also when he's up for free agency, actually spend money on a wide receiver because I think another like dynamic wide receiver, a good deep threat like T. Higgins could bring this team over the top.
Yeah, and I think most of these teams have been hurt by, you have to pay someone like Justin Herbert, you have to pay Joe Burrow, you have to eventually going to have to decide whether or not, if you're Miami, to pay Tua, and it gives you an advantage if you have one of these lower tier quarterbacks like San Francisco had with Jimmy Garoppolo. They still had money to spend for players to put around him. So I think that's an opportunity for the Green Bay Packers here, but definitely don't think he's a bad quarterback, and I think he's shown more than Kenny Pickett has so far this season.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And he's also come back as well. He's had a lot of comeback games where they're down 2 scores, he comes back. So he shows that he can fight adversity as well. So I definitely think that moving forward, the Packers have something there. Maybe sign him to like a 2-year deal and see where it goes.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that's a good option for the Packers. Credit to them for really coming back after they were down this season and then being competitive, fixing some of those turnover problems with Jordan Love. So excited to see where the Lions go the rest of the season. Want to see them get rid of some of those turnovers. And then for the Packers, want to see them keep getting better a little bit each week here. Then we had the Dallas Cowboys versus the Washington Commanders. And then we had this theory with Sam Howell, whether it was an odd or an even week. That was typically he would have a massive game one week and then just completely underperform the next week. And coming into the game, I thought that was going to be over. I thought some of those weeks where he was really good, they're just going to turn into bad games because it's fine in September, it's fine in October, but when we get to big boy football, when teams are really competing, especially for the Dallas Cowboys, they're trying to keep pace with the Philadelphia Eagles so they have a chance to overtake them for the division. Philadelphia has San Francisco and then Dallas coming up here. Dallas has been electric at home so far. So you thought this was going to be a little bit of a closer game. I thought the Cowboys were going to blow them out. Do you think this changes anything about the Cowboys in your mind, or do you think this is more of just the Commanders being a terrible football team?
I think it's I don't want to get trapped with the Cowboys because I know how the Cowboys have been the last 30 years. However, this team, I think that they're going to probably match up with somebody in the NFC South. So they'll probably win a playoff game. And depending on who they match up with in the second round, if they can avoid the 49ers, then I think the Eagles and them play competitive against each other. We saw that last year with Gardner Minshew. You saw that this past time they faced the Eagles where it came down to the last play. So if they can match up with like an Eagles or the Lions and avoid the 49ers, then I think they have a better chance. It's really going to be their defense. And then if Dak Prescott can avoid turnovers, in the last few weeks he has, and he's played really good football. So I think that if their defense can live up to what it's been all year, which is just dominating on both sides of the ball, then I think the Cowboys can make the NFC title game. It really is matchup based in this point because they probably will face someone in the NFC South in the first round.
Yeah, I think they will face someone in the NFC South. You should be able to take care of the Falcons, Saints, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, whoever it is. That's a matchup on the road. You'll definitely be able to take care of them. You took care of Tampa Bay with Tom Brady last season, but you are going to face up against the Philadelphia Eagles in the second round because you're a wild card team. And unless another one of these wild card teams maybe upsets the Lions or San Francisco 49ers, if Seattle or Green Bay can pull some magic out of their ass, I think it's pretty much a lock and it's a collision course in the divisional round for them to match up against the Philadelphia Eagles. So I think at that point, it's going to come down to the coaching matchup because Dallas has been really good at home. But the problem with that is you're going to be on the road, and then it's taken them some time to get going on the road. You had that tough loss versus Arizona, and then it wasn't until the fourth quarter versus the Carolina Panthers where they really kicked it into high gear. So I think they're definitely definitely going to face up against Philadelphia. It's just going to be coaching wise. Are you going to be able to make those adjustments versus Nick Sirianni that he's definitely going to make versus you? And then is Dak Prescott, when he has a wide open touchdown in front of him, going to rush for the touchdown like Jalen Hurts would? Or is he going to step out of bounds and then cost his team the game again?
Yeah, because the thing is, I've seen too many instances with the Cowboys with Dak Prescott where, we saw last year what happened with the clock management issues with the 49ers, and then just moments where they come up short in those big moments. And I think that this will be the year where if it doesn't work out this time around, we're going to see someone potentially like a Mike McCarthy be let go. We can see something, maybe there's some rumblings about Dak Prescott being traded. I think that that's going to be a real conversation if they can beat, the lowly NFC team. And then when it comes down to facing someone like the Niners or the Eagles, two teams that I don't think they win if they face each other in that round. I feel like I think they're shooting to play the Lions at that point, which if that's the case, they're probably going to have to, there's going to have to be some lucky matchups at that point.
Yeah, and it's probably going to be San Francisco and Detroit in the second round. So I do think they're going to face off against Philadelphia. It's just whether or not they can make those adjustments here, and then which team is the healthiest, because we did see Jalen Hurts. He has been banged up so far this season. Looks like he's getting healthier each week, but you did lose in Philadelphia to the Eagles when Jalen Hurts was on one leg. So until you beat them in Philly, I'll just have to see it to believe it for the Dallas Cowboys. So I think at this point, there's not too much to go over with the Cowboys because we know what they are. They front run against bad teams, 45-10 against the Commanders. I'm pretty sure they absolutely annihilated the Giants last year on Thanksgiving as well here.
They did, yeah.
Yeah. So Dallas Cowboys take down the Commanders. And then for the Commanders, does this diminish any of your faith in Sam Howell? Is this we just need to get rid of Ron Rivera? The team is demoralized right now. You traded away Montez Sweat. You traded away Chase Young here. So they're starting to, that in their mind, it's creeping in that this is a team that's tanking and it's going to be a full rebuild. So do you think the Commanders are just discouraged because of that? Or do you think it's just, they're just not good enough to get it done?
I just don't think they're good enough to get it done because their defense, Chase Young and Montez Sweat was their defense at that point. They still have some nice players there. But at the end of the day, I just don't think they're as talented as like a Seahawks team that's going to be in the wild card race. The Vikings, even the Packers at this point, they're playing with some edge. They've won 3 straight games. So I think that the Commanders, I think with that trade deadline passing, I think it really hurt their locker room chemistry as well. And you kind of know that Ron Rivera is going to be let go because last year he probably should have been let go.
Yeah.
And so I can't imagine what it's like in that organization right now. It seems like not just on the roster level, not just on the front office level, but it also feels like the owner is going to rebrand and kind of shake off the Commanders, Dan Snyder aura that's been around this team for too long. They might even consider building a new stadium as well, just to get out of that whole aura. So I think Sam Howell, I think he deserves another year, but at the same time, if they have a top 10 pick and there's someone like a Drake May that falls to them, I don't think that I just don't know if they decide that Sam Howell is the guy at that point.
Yeah, I think if you have a better option at quarterback, go out there and get it. But when you move on from Sam Howell, you do have to have a plan in your mind. Either we're tanking next year and we're just going to suck until Arch Manning is there, and that's fine. But for me, it's like Ron Rivera had one of the biggest errors of any head coach last season where he didn't even know his team could be eliminated from the playoffs. You have the aura of Dan Snyder still there with the toxic workplace allegations that were confirmed. And then you have FedEx Field, which is basically falling apart right now. Players can't even take a warm shower anymore. Are you kidding me? And then you have Eric Bieniemy. So I think they brought in Bieniemy. Let's have him sit behind Ron Rivera and then eventually move him into head coach, especially with Magic Johnson there. They basically look
identical.
Yeah, they basically look identical. So I think they'll give Eric Bieniemy a shot next year to be the head coach. And I definitely think he has deserved it because he made Sam Howell at one point, he was leading the league in passing. So there is something there, but make Bieniemy the offensive head coach, not just the co-head coach with Ron Rivera. I thought that was stupid when they chose to do it. And it created a weird vibe in the locker room. So time to move on from Ron Rivera, because at this point, he's just discount Bill Belichick, not even mixed with Rob Ryan. He's mixed with Rex Ryan, or mixed with Rob Ryan, not Rex Ryan at this point. And he just made error after error. And then in Carolina, what did he produce? Sean McDermott, another underachieving head coach in the league right now. So I think it's definitely time to rehaul the coaching staff, get a new GM in there, and then give this team a new direction, because you have to rename the team. Your uniforms look like an XFL team, which is embarrassing at this point. The Commanders, I just get so frustrated when a team's like, get an actual logo. Just don't have a W on your helmet. It's like the Chicago Bears helmet too. I'm like, why is it just like a weird C? You're the Chicago Bears. Put an actual bear on your helmet, or at least a paw print. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's what the owner's going to do. I think he's going to revamp the team, rebrand it. He already mentioned they're going to rebrand in the offseason, and then get a new stadium, get a new head coach. If you want to keep the enemy, that's fine. If you want to keep Sam Howell for the year, make him the sacrificial lamb next year, then do that. But they need to erase the Dan Snyder era, because it's stained the franchise, which historically, previous to Dan Snyder, was one of the perennial playoff teams.
Yeah. So Commanders, they have a lot of work to do. Dallas Cowboys, we need to see them do it in the playoffs this year. Until you get past the divisional round, we have to see more from this team. And then we had the Thursday night football game, which was the San Francisco 49ers going to Seattle to take on the Seahawks. We thought this was the year, if any, that the Seahawks would be able to take down the 49ers, but ever since that Jacksonville Jaguars game where Christian McCaffrey did not get a touchdown, even though they completely steamrolled the Jaguars, Christian McCaffrey has been on a mission to just make up for that game and not get touchdowns. In this game, absolutely dominated the game before that. And then you go to Seattle and then you win 31-13. Is this a point now where you're like, Geno Smith, he was a great quarterback filling in for Russell Wilson. We got him on a good deal, and they kind of gave him a nice 3-year affordable deal where you could bring in a quarterback maybe this draft to kind of go ahead and replace him, and then he can be that Alex Smith type of mentor for a quarterback. So do you think it's time that they decide maybe Geno Smith isn't the future, but he can be a great mentor for our young quarterback?
I feel like that's always been the plan too, because last year, I don't think anyone, even Seattle, expected him to play as well as he did. And, this year, I definitely think he's taken a bit of a step back. So this draft, go out, draft your future, because Geno Smith also, he's like 33 right now. He is getting older, so you're going to see him regress, but he's a good locker room guy, very humble. So this draft, go out and draft your quarterback, let them develop behind Geno Smith. He's a great mentor. Obviously, they're not going to keep Drew Lock. Drew Lock's going to go. He's going to go play in the XFL. But for them, I think that's been the plan all along, is they're going to draft a quarterback, let Geno Smith play for a portion of the season next year, and then when the time comes, time for that rookie to take over.
Yeah, time for that rookie to take over. And then the San Francisco 49ers go to Seattle, and then they win 31-13 over the Seahawks. And then when they were going through that 3-game losing streak, I wasn't panicking. I know you weren't panicking. We were like, this is Brock Purdy's first time ever struggling as a pro. You're allowed to go through games where maybe you don't play your best football. He never looked worse than Kenny Pickett as far as a franchise quarterback, and people aren't calling for his job yet. So I think with Brock Purdy, he's proven that he is a Jimmy Garoppolo type quarterback, but he's a little bit better than Jimmy Garoppolo because the team has performed at a higher level. But now people are switching the narrative like, oh, we never jumped off the San Francisco 49ers bandwagon. We never said they weren't the best roster in football anymore. So I think Seattle was always still one of the best teams in football. And then we'll see them match up against the Philadelphia Eagles this week, or San Francisco. So do you think San Francisco, it was kind of just a lull? They started out hot. You go through that lull kind of through October, and then you're going to revamp through November and December here?
I think the losing streak was essential for them, because if you think about it, last year, they kind of started off a little bit rusty, and then Brock Purdy steps in. He wins pretty much the first season that he's under Rome. I think he wins his first 15 games. And so when you're riding that high, I feel like inevitably you guys maybe get a little overconfident. And then when you start to struggle, it can start to crumble fast. And for them, they had 3 ugly games. And then once when they started to piece things together with the Jacksonville Jaguars game, that's when I really think they started to run again and realized, like, Brock Purdy looked at the tape, saw some of the mistakes he was making, and was able to learn from that. And I think if this team ends up making it to the Super Bowl, they're going to look back at that 3-game losing streak and saying this was the most essential part of their season.
Yeah, especially for a team like the San Francisco 49ers, when you have that many good players on your team and you do have the best roster on football, and I believe that they do with the San Francisco 49ers. I think you have to go through some adversity to win a Super Bowl. We've seen teams go 7-1 and then completely fall apart. Arizona Cardinals, and then we saw the Steelers start 7-0, one of the worst 7-0 teams in NFL history, and then completely fall apart. And then the San Francisco 49ers start out hot, annihilate the Dallas Cowboys, and then you have a tough road trip, and it wasn't like they were playing easy teams either. You go to Cleveland, that's one of the toughest places to play in the league with Myles Garrett at the peak of his powers with that defense. Then you have to go on Monday Night Football, back-to-back road games versus the Minnesota Vikings, and then Kirk Cousins was playing the best football I've ever seen him play in that game. He wants to say that, hey, no Justin Jefferson, no problem. I'm going to make Jordan Addison a star here. Going to make TJ Hawkinson a star here. And then Brock Purdy did have some errant turnovers in that game that the Vikings were able to capitalize on. But we're seeing right now that the Minnesota Vikings actually have a really good defense, especially with Brian Flores. They held the Chicago Bears to 12 points with having 4 turnovers. So I don't think it's crazy that they lost 3 games in a row. You go through some adversity. You did lose Deebo Samuel, who seems like he's the engine of that offense, and he adds a new dynamic because you have to worry about whenever he's in motion, is it going to be McCaffrey getting the ball or is it going to be Deebo Samuel coming out of the backfield? So he adds a new dynamic to that offense. And then you did lose one of your best tackles in the league for a stretch of time. So that's always going to shake up the pass rush a little bit and then hurry Brock Purdy. So I think now that they're back, it was a good adversity for them to go through. Let's see how they match up against the Eagles, though.
Yeah, because I believe that they face each other this week, the Eagles and Niners.
They do, yeah.
This is a real test for both teams. The Eagles have been juggernauts to this point, winning in a lot of different ways. And the Niners, I think they're a similar team where they can win in a lot of different ways as well. So that's probably the matchup of the year at this point. Because ultimately, if the 49ers can at least put up like a really good fight against them, then that NFC matchup that is inevitable for them if they make it back to the title game, then that's going to be a great game for them.
Yeah, and I think they definitely are better than the Cowboys and the Bills. However, the San Francisco 49ers kind of win in a similar way where typically when they win, they are steamrolling a team. They are blowing a team out. So we need to see them actually in a battle with a team winning a close game. And it's impressive when you blow someone out, and it's impressive anytime you win a game in the NFL. But let's see how they react with Kyle Shanahan, because he's had some clock management issues, especially when they have a lead going up against Nick Sirianni. It's going to be a chess match in that game, but let's see how the San Francisco 49ers are able to adjust and then re-scheme in a close game, because most of their wins have been blowouts.
Yeah, most of their games have been blowouts. They kind of remind me of the NFC Dolphins, and maybe it's because of Mike McDaniels and some of the talent that's moved from the 49ers to the Dolphins, but they are a team that they have a lot of speed, they have a lot of talent, and when they do face adversity, I feel like when they play badly, they play ugly. Same with the Dolphins. I think that the 49ers are much more proven, and they've actually beaten a winning team. So obviously I think they're a little bit better, but similar team where if things start to go south for them, I feel like they then kind of catastrophize things a little bit and start to play some really bad football. But they're still a team that they have Chase Young, and I think the addition of him has been monstrous for them. That pass rush is almost unstoppable with him, Nick Bosa, and Fred Warner, and even Javon Hargrave as well. So this team will still be in the mix, but like I mentioned before, the adversity that they faced, the 3-game losing streak, I think is essential for them moving forward.
Yeah, and now it's time for the Miami Dolphins versus the New York Jets. Miami has been dominant versus teams that don't have a winning record so far over the past few years. Haven't beat a winning team since the Buffalo Bills last season when they won that close, tough battle in Miami. However, they go to New York, tough environment. Tim Boyle is now the starting quarterback, and then the Jets allow a pick six at the end of the half returned 98 yards for a touchdown. Are you kidding me? The Jets are reaching a new low, and it's just laughable because we say all the time on the show, one thing that's going to kill a great defense, and 2 weeks ago, the Jets were ranked as the #1 total defense on Pro Football Focus, and now they are 4-7. The idea of Aaron Rodgers coming back was keeping hope alive, but now you're definitely not going to make the playoffs, especially in the AFC, and the team has fallen so far behind that it's like you knew what Zach Wilson was coming into the year, and then you thought Aaron Rodgers could fix him, but he was struggling to score in September and October. And if he's going to be struggling to score in those, what's he going to do in the later months of the year when it's colder? He's playing outside in New York, and he's going to put up 13 points against the Miami Dolphins, and it's not like you can't go up against the Miami Dolphins and get yards. And then you thought Aaron Rodgers was going to be the savior for this team. Well, what did Aaron Rodgers bring to the New York Jets? He brought over Nathaniel Hackett, currently the worst offensive coordinator in the NFL. He brought over Adam Lazard, and now a healthy scratch for most games.
And a horrible contract, too.
4
years, $40 million. They're going to be paying him $12 million the next 3 years.
Yeah, $12 million over the next 3 years. And then he brought over Billy Turner, Billy Turner, who's been a turnstile on the offensive line. And then he brought over Randall Cobb, 3 catches, 12 targets for 20 yards. Great. And then he brought Tim Boyle, statistically one of the worst QBs in college and professional football history. And then he also brought over Dalvin Cook, who's averaging 3 yards per carries and has no touchdowns.
So Aaron Rodgers has cursed the Jets, basically. And we were critical of him when we were going into the offseason. We're like, he's going out and signing Randall Cobb, Adam Lazard, freaking Dalvin Cook, who a lot of people we saw he kind of lost a little bit of his burst last year, still played some good football, but now at this point, like everything that the Jets are facing right now is their fault because Aaron Rodgers went down week 1. You hated to see it. It was a tragedy what happened. And, I don't think the Jets deserve it at that point, but I understand, having Zach Wilson step in for a few weeks, but as soon as you saw a sample size of 4 or 5 games and you saw how bad he was playing, why didn't you go after Carson Wentz? Why didn't you trade for Josh Dobbs? Why did you move forward with Tim Boyle, who had 2 touchdowns in college? And I don't usually like to discriminate against, bad quarterbacks. I'm not here to rip on them. Zach Wilson, I know he's a human at the end of the day, but Tim Boyle is the face of why is it him and not blank, right? Like, for the last 7 years or so, it's been like, why does Colin Kaepernick not have a job? Why does RG3 not have a job? Why does Cam Newton not have a job? For a while we were saying, why does Carson Wentz not have a job?
Yeah.
And now he's with the Rams. But you see someone like Tim Boyle, who had 2 touchdowns in college, undrafted, comes in. He's played for, I think, 4 teams, played for the Lions, played for the Packers. Now he plays for the Jets. And I'm not here to hate on the man that is Tim Boyle, but the player that is Tim Boyle, how does he keep getting opportunities? Because he was horrible against the Dolphins. And the Dolphins, their defense is not spectacular. They've underperformed pretty severely, I would say. And I'm like, there's better options in free agency at this point than Tim Boyle. At this point, they're just killing whatever momentum they did have at that point. And it all comes back down to the Jets, the same team that drafted Christian Hackenberg, the same team that drafted Bryce Petty, the same team, Sam Darnold, Zach Wilson. The list goes on with them. And this is the grave that they built for themselves, and they deserve all of it.
Yeah, and I have a theory with all of this Aaron Rodgers. I'm going to make the fastest comeback in history, and if he doesn't do it, my theory with it is Aaron Rodgers has this ability to stay relevant, stay in the news. He always needs to be the center of attention. Even when he's not playing on the football field, he's going to find a way for himself to be talked about. So Aaron Rodgers and this whole, I'm going to come back this season, I'm going to lead you to the playoffs this year. Well, you're out of the playoffs so far right now, and you're definitely not going to make it, especially in the AFC, even if Aaron Rodgers does come back and run the table. But for me, even though he is back in practice and throwing passes, like he always had this, maybe I'll leave the Packers this year, maybe not. And then we had to go through that drama for 3 years in Green Bay. Then he had to make it all about himself. So he has this ability, and it is a great ability, and I'm not criticizing him for it, but he just has this ability to stay relevant, stay in the news, and this whole fact that I'm going to come back in the fastest in history and it would be remarkable to see. I'm not saying it isn't, but it feels more like Aaron Rodgers trying to stay relevant, trying to stay in the media, trying to stay in the media's talking points so far this season. And it just seems like an attention grab so far. Like, oh, is Aaron Rodgers going to come back? And then he's creating headlines, and the guy is great at it. And it's not a criticism, but at the same time, you can easily look at it and be like, I know why we're having this conversation, and especially for the New York Jets. And this is a team that's like, you signed Brett Favre. You made the exact same mistake. And then
15 years ago.
Yeah, 15 years ago. And now you're signing Aaron Rodgers again. It's the same exact mistake. And the way you're going to kill and waste the best defense ranked by Pro Football Focus and Robert Saleh, who I think is a really good head coach and hasn't got a fair shake just with how unlucky they have been at the quarterback position. You had Sam Darnold, absolute bust. There's propaganda by Colin Cowherd and Fox Sports to put him as a top pick. And I think that was all propaganda for Sam Darnold. And then you have Zach Wilson, the most NFL ready quarterback. Anytime someone says most NFL ready quarterback,
Bust.
It means immediate bust. Josh Rosen, Zach Wilson,
Sam
Darnold coming out of it. They're like, yeah, this guy's going to be ready to go. Kenny Pickett spent 4 years in college. Like, well, maybe he spent 4 years in college for a reason, and because he wasn't ready to go into the NFL because Trevor Lawrence came out of college early. He was a young quarterback. Lamar Jackson, the only one it really worked with was Joe Burrow when he spent all of that time in college, just because he had to go to Ohio, then LSU, bounced around a little bit. But this whole thing with the Jets, it's like you shouldn't have got Aaron Rodgers to begin with, not because Aaron Rodgers isn't a Hall of Fame talent, but because he's underachieved in Green Bay in the playoffs last year. And the past few years in Green Bay, they've had a Super Bowl quality team, but they've just underperformed in the playoffs. And then you think that's going to be different in the AFC, which has a more stacked conference, has tougher competition, where in the NFC, it's really just the Philadelphia Eagles and the San Francisco 49ers. But no, you lost to Jimmy G at home and you only put up 10 points. And that's your fix for the future? No. What all you did was destroy the morale of that team. You thought you could fix Zach Wilson, and now you have Nathaniel Hackett. You're paying Adam Lazard too much money. You have Randall Cobb. Now you have Dalvin Cook on that team. It's like, it didn't fix your team. All it did is, as soon as Aaron Rodgers leaves, you still don't know how to draft a quarterback. And what are you going to do? Bring a quarterback in free agency?
Well, we've seen with the Colts, we've seen with the Jets at this point, and there's plenty of other examples, the Panthers even, teams that seem to think that they have just one last hole to fix, and it's always the quarterback position. And it's because we saw what happened with Matt Stafford and Tom Brady, where everyone seems to think that they're just one quarterback away. But the Jets should have known that it wasn't just Zach Wilson. Yes, they have this great defense, but they also don't have an offensive line, and they also don't have a dynamic number 2 wide receiver. You somewhat had it last year with Elijah Moore, but you traded him because he demanded to be traded.
Yeah.
And then now it's like, even when he comes back, like, it's going to be Garrett Wilson and who else at that point? Because Tyler Conklin, he's a fine tight end. I'd say he's in the Hayden Hurst conversation. And then other than that, it's like, who's your other receivers? Adam Lazard, healthy scratch, terrible contract, one of the worst in the NFL now. And then Randall Cobb, you literally took him out of retirement to play with you at this point. The Jets, don't be like the Colts when they had Carson Wentz, Phillip Rivers, Jacoby Brissett. You're not one piece away. You have plenty of old holes to fix. And that team, they had the Frank Reich era, which we'll talk about Frank Reich soon enough. But you're not one fix away. And every team that does this, it usually fails. The Rams, they had Matt Stafford. They traded for Matt Stafford. They had Jared Goff. They made a Super Bowl. They had Aaron Donald. They had Von Miller that they traded for. They had weapons. They were good. They were one piece away. They made the NFC title game multiple times.
Good Cooper Kupp and OBJ.
Yeah. And then the Bucks, you look around them. They were 7-9 when a guy threw 30 interceptions, and they still nearly made the playoffs with him. Okay, that makes sense. You also brought in, I don't know, the greatest quarterback of all time, arguably one of the greatest athletes of all time as well. Maybe a little bit different than Aaron Rodgers, and going to the Jets, who have the worst winning percentage of the last 15 years. The only team that hasn't made the playoffs since 2010. By the way, for context, 2010, I was 12 years old, and you were 11, 9, something like that.
2010. Yeah, I wasn't 10 until November.
Yeah. So we have not seen the Jets be a playoff team since Mark Sanchez, and I was a 10-year-old at that point, 12-year-old at that point.
That was the last time Aaron Rodgers made a Super Bowl, mind you. That was Pittsburgh versus Green Bay that year, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the world has changed a little bit. New president, social media, whatever else you want to include. The world was a lot different since the
Three
Jets.
new presidents.
3 new presidents, soon to be 4. And it's like the Jets, they're going to be the new Colts because Aaron Rodgers, he might even retire after this year because it's Aaron Rodgers. He's going to at least float it around. And then when he leaves, they're going to be like, all right, let's go out and get Geno Smith. Let's go out and get Ryan Tannehill. Let's go out and get Mac Jones. You know, that's what they're going to do the next 4 years because they're one piece away. And then you're going to see Sauce Gardner leave. You're going to see DJ Reed leave. You're going to see Quinnen Williams leave. And that defense will not be good. And they're going to ruin what is a pretty fantastic defense.
Yeah, and I think Robert Saleh has been a great head coach, and hopefully he definitely deserves another opportunity because he's been better than some of these other young head coaches, because what he's been able to do with that defense, especially with how bad the Jets have been, they almost made the playoffs last year and they were 7-10, but it looks like they're going to be worse than they were last year. And that's with Aaron Rodgers. That's adding all of Aaron Rodgers' buddies on your team, as well as his friend, who's his dart buddy, who's the offensive coordinator here. Nathaniel Hackett works great with Aaron Rodgers, but so far we haven't seen that he works well with any other quarterback outside of Aaron Rodgers. Hasn't seen that he's been able to fix Zach Wilson, and I think that's mostly just a problem with Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle and them needing to have a better backup quarterback, because as soon as I saw Aaron Rodgers get hurt, I turned to you and like, all right, they need to go out there and sign Carson Wentz. And then if Carson Wentz, for some reason that Matt Stafford gets hurt, and I hope he doesn't, goes with the Rams and absolutely balls out, you'll be like, oh, we could have had that guy. Because I know one thing about Carson Wentz, he is a gamer and he's actually going to care and he's going to try to win, and he's built for New York football in November, and Zach Wilson is not. Like, Carson Wentz can still sling it down the field. It's got a little bit of Brett Favre and Big Ben in him. He just gets injured too much because he holds the ball way too long, and somehow he figured out a way to sprain both of his ankles at once.
Yeah, and he's just one of those guys that he has very high highs and very low lows also. And I think at this point, the Jets, like I mentioned earlier, they buried their own grave. And it's honestly entertaining to watch at this point.
Yeah, it's entertaining to watch at this point. And then we kind of called like this Aaron Rodgers situation. It may work for a year or two, but you're going to be back to square one. You're still making the same mistakes you have throughout history. However, a team that has learned from their mistakes and finally moved on, the first time since 2020 that the Pittsburgh Steelers have had more than 400 total yards, the first time that they've outgained an opponent so far this season. Even though they only got 16 points, the Pittsburgh Steelers finally moved on from Matt Canada. Finally, after Big Ben Roethlisberger was every week on his podcast, like, I have no idea what this team is doing. And he was saying it in the nicest way possible because he probably knows Matt Canada because he's close to the Steelers organization, and you never want to call for someone's job. But when the offense looks that bad, and then as soon as the guy leaves, you get 400 total yards gain. It's the first time you actually outgain an opponent. And then Jaylen Warren looks like he was rushing better. That Najee Harris run in this game was absolutely filthy, where he's kind of in the mix, and then absolutely runs. I saw the notification pop up on my phone. It's a little bit behind on red zone. Like, Najee Harris run a big run, then the play comes up and like, it looks like he got stuffed for 5 yards, but no, he just keeps going, keeps pushing. Looks like the Steelers are inspired by Matt Canada just not being on that team. So definitely an addition by subtraction. So does this give you more hope for the Pittsburgh Steelers as a playoff team heading into the playoffs? Because they're now 7-4. They're right there with the Cleveland Browns. I believe they've leaped them so far in the standings right now because they beat them head to head this year. So give you more faith for the Steelers heading into the playoffs that they're actually going to be entertaining. They're not the Guantanamo Bay Steelers anymore.
Yes, absolutely. I think Matt Canada was what brought them to Guantanamo Bay, because I was so frustrated all year. I'm like, you have George Pickens, very talented receiver, one of my favorite receivers who doesn't get the praise he deserves. Deontay Johnson, very solid receiver, very good receiver. Najee Harris hasn't really panned out as much as I thought he would in the NFL, but I've seen flashes, like we saw flashes in this game. I'm like, oh, Najee Harris can run. That's awesome. And I know a lot of fantasy players will always hate him, and that's understandable. He burned a lot of players. Jaylen Warren, great player as well. So they have pieces. And Kenny Pickett, one of those guys who's kind of an anomaly, similar to Jordan Love, similar to Sam Howell, where you're like, okay, some weeks he looks fantastic and some weeks he looks horrible. Well, this game, he looked pretty good. And then we saw Najee come alive. We saw Jaylen Warren come alive.
Pat Freiermuth.
Yeah, Pat Freiermuth, another guy that I forgot to mention. Very solid tight end. And it's funny how you remove the worst offensive coordinator in the league by a very wide margin, and now suddenly they have an offense. If they could continue the momentum next week, then yes, this is actually a legit playoff team. And I want them in the playoffs at that point because their defense is stellar. They have the second in the MVP in TJ Watt here. Behind Jalen Hurts.
First in the MVP.
And then they have a really good defense. They're able to create turnovers. They have a really great head coach in Mike Tomlin who could win Coach of the Year. And then they have weapons. If their offense can perform like it's capable of, then they actually are a really deep threat. I think a team like the Dolphins is horrified to face the Steelers. I think a team like even someone like the Jaguars could struggle with
the Ravens.
The Ravens. Like they have plenty of teams that could give them a living hell. Hell, even I couldn't even say the Chiefs, dare I say, with the weapons that they have or lack thereof, they're going to give a lot of teams a lot of trouble. And I think a lot of these guys are going to be trying to avoid them because they're a tough out. They always have been.
Yeah, the Steelers are always a tough out, and you have a head coach with experience. You have a head coach that's been to a Super Bowl, knows what it takes to get done, and especially Kenny Pickett. He's just a bizarre anomaly because, well, he does. Anthony Richardson has the same amount of passing touchdowns, and he hasn't played since October 2nd. Kenny Pickett has 8 game-winning drives that he's led for the Pittsburgh Steelers so far in his career, which is one of the most in the NFL right now currently. So he has proven that under the bright lights, he can get it done. He has performed on Sunday Night Football last year versus the Baltimore Ravens. He's done it. And then it seems like when the lights are brightest, Kenny Pickett's one of those quarterbacks. He's like the anti-Kirk Cousins. When it's a 1 o'clock slate, not the best quarterback in the world, but when you see him on primetime, he does make some big plays. He can make some big throw. So I do want to see him with another offensive coordinator. The offense was a little bit more balanced. They weren't behind the chains. And I think that was the big thing for the Pittsburgh Steelers is they were always behind the chains. It was always 2nd and 11. It was always 3rd and long. In this game, it was a lot more balanced. The run to pass ratio was pretty balanced. And then how they were passing it. All right, we're going to go middle now, outside. And Kenny Pickett does seem like a quarterback that needs to use his tight ends, especially when you have someone like Pat Freiermuth. First game, no Matt Canada. Best game of his career. 9 catches, 120 yards. And then he led all tight ends in fantasy this week. And then you have George Pickens, not the best game, but 3 catches, 58 yards. So I think it's going to be a lot more balanced, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to be a tough out because especially without Mark Andrews, I didn't love the Baltimore Ravens offense. And I think the Ravens are going to take a step back, especially when you don't have your big tight end, because Mark Andrews opens up so much for the little runs and the misdirection that they do on offense. And Mark Andrews is typically the guy making those blocks. And then he's also the guy that has that symbiotic connection with Lamar Jackson. And they kind of just know where they're going to be, like a Brady and a Gronk, like a Patrick Mahomes and a Travis Kelce, like a George Kittle there. So losing that, I think the Steelers actually have a chance now to win the division. We picked them to go 11-6. Looks like that record is probably going to pan out at this point. Then you get the Ravens again. And they already beat the Ravens once this year, so that's going to be a huge matchup upcoming here.
Yeah, and like if you're looking at the 3 teams that are still in the mix, Bengals, not really much to talk about in this game because, you know, Joe Burrow's gone, Jake Browning doing the best he can, but facing the Steelers, I want to see him against a less impressive defense.
Jamar Chase's catches, though, twice the ball gets tipped in the air and Jamar Chase locates it. Like, there's not too much to talk about the Bengals except for the greatness of Jamar Chase. Seems like he's a guy that's not going to matter who his quarterback is. He's just going to ball out. The fact that he was able to stay patient, locate those catches after it gets tipped in the air, like, shout out to Jamar Chase, because those were 2 incredible plays. And then he turned them into he turned nothing into something on both of those plays there.
Yeah. And that's why he's a top 5 wide receiver. But the Bengals are basically out of the mix at this point. But the 3 teams that are still in it, the Ravens, Browns, and Steelers, like there's questions with the Ravens with the loss of Mark Andrews, and the Browns, you know, you have a PJ Walker, you have yourself a DTR, but DTR did go down with injury as well. So there's question marks with both of those teams and especially with Myles Garrett also getting banged up in that game. The Steelers, if their offense can go back to what it's capable of doing, and they have that defense, all of them have a great defense, so that's not really an advantage. But like if their offense can actually be an efficient offense like they're capable of, even be like a middle of the pack offense at that point, maybe like between 12 and 15, then this team absolutely could win the division. In fact, I think they will.
Yeah, I think they definitely can win the division. So I'm excited to see how the Steelers progress. But who would have thought that you fire the worst offensive coordinator in the league and you're going to step up here? So we need a competition between Matt Canada and Nathaniel Hackett to see who the worst coordinator in the league is. And we'll see there. But finally, you outgained an opponent the first time since 2020.
Disgrace.
Yeah, and then Matt Canada never had 400 total yards on offense. Absolutely ridiculous. You get 16 points. However, you were in Cincinnati. Cincinnati's defense is still tough, so 16 points for an AFC North matchup, that's okay.
It's expected, honestly.
Yeah, that's expected. But however, do have another low-scoring game here, and I'll let you take the reins here. Patriots take until Sunday to name a starting quarterback. They were like, Belichick, who's the starting quarterback this week? And he was like, I don't know. We're still figuring it out. Just got to do what's best for the team. Next question. Then they asked Mac Jones, Mac, do you know who's starting this week? And he was like, I'm not sure. What I do know is I need to play better this week than I have in times past and give my team like a chance to win here, you know? And then, yeah, that's my answer. Like, I don't know. I just know I need to play better. And they asked Bailey Zappi, do you know who's starting this week? So like, I don't know, man. It might be me. It might be Mac. Who knows?
Yeah.
And then
much.
Sunday we find out it's Mac Jones. And then as soon as this game started, I was like, oh, Mac is about to get benched.
Oh my God. He played horrible. You know, Mac Jones had a QBR of 27. He would have been better off QBR wise to just spike it into the ground on every single pass than play the game that he played.
Really?
Literally.
If he spiked it every play, he would have been better.
He threw 21 passes. If he threw all 21 passes into the ground, he'd have a QBR of 39. He had a QBR of 27. And I was curious, like, the Patriots have proven this year that they have no idea what they're doing at quarterback. First, they signed Malik Cunningham as an undrafted free agent. They cut Bailey Zappi. They bring Bailey Zappi back. They cut Malik Cunningham twice. They bring him back again. They bring in Will Grier. They cut Will Grier. They bring back Will Grier. They cut Will Grier. They bring in Matt Corral, who they actually ruined his career. That's a whole story there in and of tearing his ACL, bringing him in, cutting him, ruining his career also. So it's just a constant barrage of let's switch out the quarterbacks and then bring them back. You know what you can do? If all of them suck, there are other quarterbacks who want an opportunity. RG3 will attest for himself that he wants an opportunity. For them, Mac Jones has been benched 4 times this year. Not once, not twice, not 3 times. 4 times.
Yeah.
And at this point, it's like, what are you doing? This is like Mac Jones. I am not a Mac Jones fan. You know that. The fans know. Everyone knows Mac Jones is not my favorite.
It's documented in the draft. You're like nervous the Patriots were going to take him. And you're like, don't take Mac Jones.
And that's why we keep joking about them getting Bo Nix, because you know they're going to do it. You know it's going to happen. It's inevitable at this point, because God forbid, and this isn't me being any sort of way, Patriots fans, Patriots front office, they are anemic to having a non-white quarterback. It's a real thing. It's well documented. So they have to compare between 2 of the white boys, 2 of the sour cream boys. And Mac Jones, what does he do? The first drive, interception, ugly interception. We're like, here we go again, Mac Jones.
Yep.
And then he gets another opportunity, throws another pick, another horrible interception. He gets benched. Bailey Zappi comes in. And guess what? Bailey Zappi also sucks. There's plenty of tape. Both of them aren't good at this point. So I don't understand why every single week it's a question of who's it going to be? How about neither at this point? How about, hell, even Will Grier? Give Will Grier a chance. Give Malik Cunningham, the guy that you keep bringing back and you keep playing ping pong with yourself at this point, because no one else wants him. It's like, just start him, because what do you have to lose? You guys have scored 13 points the last 2 weeks combined at this point. You guys have the worst offense. You guys have scored 13 points a game this year. What is the point? What are you doing? Because their defense isn't even the problem. They've given up 10 points in back-to-back weeks. They're the first team in 35 years to give up 10 points in 2 straight weeks and lose. They have found new ways to disappoint their fan base. And it's funny to watch because the Patriots were juggernauts for a long time. But at this point, it's hilarious. I love seeing them continuously kick themselves in the nuts. And it's going to keep happening because they're going to start Mac Jones next week. He's going to play the first half. He's going to throw a few interceptions. They're going to bench him. You're going to see a bunch of Mac Jones sad boy edits because he deserves it. And then they're going to start Bailey Zappi. And then at this point, it's like, what's the plan?
Yeah.
What are you doing? Because they have the 2nd overall pick. They might get Caleb Williams. They might get Drake May. We don't know. But honestly, I have no hope that they're going to pick the right guy because they have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, and it reminds me of the situation when Tom Brady was being interviewed by Patrick Bet-David. If you watch that interview, incredible interview, make sure you go check it out. But Tom Brady was basically saying when he was in Michigan, they're like, all right, I'm going to start one of you one quarter, then you're going to play the next drive. And then they had this weird system with the quarterbacks where Tom Brady would get benched and then they would put the other quarterback in. The other quarterback would suck. Then they would put Tom Brady back in. He would lead them on a game-winning drive. And then we'd be like, oh, I don't know who's starting this week. It's different when it's at college and at Michigan. Like, at a college university, like that makes a little bit more sense, but you're basically operating under a college program in New England. And then Bill Belichick is in the situation where he's like, both of these quarterbacks suck. I took a quarterback in the first round. Maybe we would be able to fix it, but Bill Belichick is still at the point where I actually think he should still be the head coach. And the defense this year, before Christian Gonzalez got hurt, before Matt Judon got hurt, which is your two best players on defense, the defense was actually playing really well. Miami came to town. You held them to, I believe, 17 points on Sunday Night Football. And it was really just the offense that's struggling here. And then bring in Bill O'Brien really isn't going to fix that. So for me, if Bill Belichick can go out there and then just take his GM powers away, still pay him his money, pay Bill Belichick whatever you want to pay him. He's still the greatest coach in NFL history. Just take his GM power away, get someone in there who's drafting the receivers on offense, who's drafting the quarterback. And I think Bill Belichick could still be the head coach because you're allowed to fall off for a few years after you dominate for the past 25 years, basically, as a head coach. So I don't think Bill Belichick should be fired because of this, because I think when your specialty as a head coach is defense and the defense is still playing really well, that should show you like, okay, he's still coaching his specialty really well. He's just not coaching the offense to a point because he doesn't have any weapons. The offensive line is worse this year. Ramondre Stevenson is worse this year. I didn't think Ezekiel Elliott was going to do anything this year. I'd rather them sign DeAndre Hopkins, but I think Mac Jones is average at everything at best, and he's not special at anything. And that's what I've always thought about Mac Jones. So have to go out there, get another quarterback, just go out there and get someone else in the offensive room that's going to be able to scout and draft receivers, because for Bill Belichick, he's an older guy. So how much does it really mean to him when he already has 6 Super Bowls? None. Do I agree with Rex Ryan that Bill Belichick didn't accomplish any of it and it was all Tom Brady? No, because I feel like those first 3 Super Bowls was a lot of Bill Belichick. Clearly, they had Tom Brady on a leash those few seasons, even though Tom Brady statistically was a great quarterback. And I think the last 3 Super Bowls they won with Brady was really Brady taking control of the organization and coming into his own. So do I agree with Rex Ryan that none of it was Bill Belichick? That's lunacy, especially when it's coming from another head coach. It just comes across as jealous and a little bit venomous.
Yeah, isn't it ironic? He also coached the Jets and the Bills, 2 teams that he owned.
Yeah.
2 teams that won 3 games against Brady in 20 years. I don't know.
Was Brady coaching the defense?
Yeah, no. No, here's the thing. You look at all their Super Bowls, right? They faced the greatest show on turf who had the best offense statistically of all time. One of them, at least.
Right.
They held them to 17 points. Okay. That's very impressive. And then, they consistently drafted players like, Ty Law. I know that Rodney Harrison played for the Steelers before, but you got someone like Rodney Harrison, Mike Vrabel, Vince Wilfork,
Richard Seymour.
The list goes on. Name all the defensive players that they've hit on. Devin McCourty. You can go on about even Christian Gonzalez, new in this draft, him as well. Getting in someone like Matt Judon. Getting somebody like a Patrick Chung even.
Yeah, when they had Darrelle Revis and I forget.
Aqib Talib.
Browner.
Yeah, Brandon Browner.
Yeah.
So he knows how to build a defense. And the defense for those 20 years was consistently top 10. And that definitely took the pressure off the offense, especially as they struggled with receivers as well. But like Brady took care of the offense, Belichick took care of the defense. And that's why they were consistently 14-2 every single year, because you couldn't really lose a drive because Brady would march down the field, get a field goal or touchdown, and then it'd stop them on defense. And that's how they kept winning. But I agree. I think that I understand if he leaves. I feel like it should be his decision if he wants to return.
Yeah.
Because he's earned that. He's won 6 Super Bowls. He's brought them to 9. He's basically turned them from what was the Eagles before their Super Bowl to now they are up there with the Steelers in no time.
Right.
So he earns it to himself.
Yeah. I want to see him in Dallas.
Yeah.
Like, if you're telling me you gave Bill Belichick Dallas's roster right now, they're not making the Super Bowl, I think defensively they would be able to shut down San Francisco and Philadelphia if you have Bill Belichick coaching that team.
Yeah. I think if Belichick wants to make that move, he's able to. Because he really, if he's going to go somewhere else, he's got to go somewhere where they already have their franchise guy.
The Bills.
The Bills would work there too, or the Cowboys. Like Dak Prescott is a formidable quarterback, a good quarterback, and they have the weapons. They have the offensive line. They have the weapons there. And just don't give him GM powers. No head coach has been successful with a good, he can't be both. It's just too much of a job to have, So get out there, sign somebody who's a good offensive lineman. I think I've heard that the GM of the Texans is in the mix as well, Nick Caserio, who's connected to the Patriots. He's the one that got CJ Stroud. He's the one that got Will Anderson. We'll see how that goes, but I think him getting fired is a little bit harsh, and I think it's the Patriots because even in the last few years, even without Brady, they've still been competitive, although average at best. But with that Cam Newton team, that roster was awful. They went 7-9. They went 10-7 with Mac Jones, and then they've continuously regressed since then. But it's the offense that's been the problem.
I mean, you still held Indy to 13 points. Which is
10.
a good 10 points, which is a good offense.
Yes, that's an offense with Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, all these guys, and they held them to 10. And then this Giants offense is by no means a dynamic offense, but Tommy DeVito, back-to-back games of 100-plus QBR, and the first undrafted rookie to do that. So credit to Tommy DeVito.
First undrafted rookie to beat Bill Belichick.
Yeah. So
milk and cookies coming up. He's going to get the crust cut off his bread today.
Yeah, mom's going to make his favorite meal. That's for sure. So, I mean, I can't say much about the Giants, but the Patriots, it's an absolute mess. It's the quarterback situation that just makes me sick.
Yeah, and it's the quarterback situation, but it's also, you talked about the New York Giants where you thought it was just the quarterback that's your problem. Don't be fooled and think it's only the quarterback that's the Patriots' problem because Kayshon Boutte cannot be your leading receiver.
Demario Douglas. Yeah,
this guy's like 5'4".
Yeah, he's fine if he's your third, maybe. But go out there, pursue a T. Higgins. Go out there, pursue an Amari Cooper. Pursue one of these guys that's going to be available. You guys have cap space. You guys are fourth in cap space. You have plenty of cap space. You'll be just fine. You haven't paid anybody. You haven't paid anybody except for Matt Judon. That's the only person that's getting paid right now.
Yeah.
So go out there and sign somebody because look at what they did with Randy Moss. They traded for him. It worked. They traded for Wes Welker. It worked. The only person you've drafted successfully as a wide receiver is Julian Edelman, who was a quarterback that turned into a wide receiver.
Yeah.
Go out there and draft one, please.
Yeah. Even your wide receiver trades, like the last thing I'll say here is like you gave up a second round pick for Mohamed Sanu. That's a fireable offense for any GM.
Yes. That was horrible. And especially because Emmanuel Sanders was available.
Yeah. But I digress. We have probably one of the most competitive, most fun games this week. I thought this was the most underrated game on the Sunday slate here in Red Zone. We had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers heading to Indianapolis. I had Indianapolis in that game simply because I thought the coaching of Shane Steichen was better. I thought Gardner Minshew and Baker Mayfield. For me, Gardner Minshew is just Baker Mayfield with a mullet. And then I thought just the talent of the Indianapolis Colts and being able to run the ball to take some pressure off of Gardner Minshew in this game. And oh my God, Jonathan Taylor is officially back. The Indianapolis Colts are in a position where they are in the playoff picture right now. You have Josh Downs, you have Alec Pierce, you have Shane Steichen, who's one of the best head coaching acquires of the offseason so far. Look like Nick Sirianni's tree is panning out very well for him so far. He's already produced some good head coaches in the NFL right now. So do you think this was Indianapolis Colts team that kind of struggled a little bit and they're going to start to figure it out when Jonathan Taylor gets going? Or do you want to see them kind of fall out of the playoff picture?
I prefer if they fall out of the playoff race because I still want to see a team like the Texans. And even though they might not deserve it, there's someone like the Bills, because I look at the matchups and it's always going to be the best quarterbacks that end up facing off against each other. I'd rather see someone like a CJ Stroud face off against someone like a Lamar Jackson or a Trevor Lawrence than Gardner Minshew.
I would love to see Gardner Minshew face off against Lamar because I know he can go to Baltimore and beat him. I saw him do it.
I'd rather see someone like the Texans. So the Texans just they're just more exciting of a team. So I do think the Colts will inevitably be out of the playoffs, but they should feel very good of where they are right now because this is a team that going into the season, they had the aftermath of the Frank Reich era. They had the aftermath of the Jeff Saturday era. The ESPN analysts, I don't, to this day, this is one of the biggest mysteries in NFL history. Why in the world was Jeff Saturday hired? Don't understand. When they had John Fox in the organization, they had Reggie Wayne, they had all these other guys that either had coaching, Gus Bradley also, all guys who were there, who have been a head coach, whatever. But they've come in, they are in the playoffs if the season ended today, and they've played great football, even with the loss of their rookie quarterback, Anthony Richardson, who also looked very good when he was actually playing. So yeah. I'm impressed with what I've seen from them, but I do think inevitably they will be out of the playoffs.
Yeah, inevitably they may be out of the playoffs, and I think this is one of the most bizarre divisions in football, and I compared them to potentially being the NFC East of this year, where you have a bunch of teams have underachieved in the past, and then suddenly you have all these teams popping up that could be really good. We were the first to jump on the Texans bandwagon. We said they were going to be at least 8-9. I wanted to pick them to go to the playoffs this year, but I was like, the AFC is so tough, so loaded. I just think someone would have to either get hurt, a la Joe Burrow, unfortunately going down this year, or they would have to be just dynamic on offense, and then Tank Dell would just have to be something we didn't see coming, and that has been the case. So for the Indianapolis Colts, you draft Anthony Richardson, and he looked very good. He was just way too reckless. So if you can go through the offseason, figure out the footwork there so he can stay in the pocket, really teach him when to run, show him some highlights of someone like Jalen Hurts or Patrick Mahomes, and I feel like both those guys really have a good feel on how to run and how to protect themselves so they're not getting blown up and lit up on every play. But this is a team that has weapons everywhere. Josh Downs, great draft pick. Michael Pittman is having a resurgence this year. We were kind of always lukewarm on him, but I feel like he really beefed up in the offseason and has improved so far. Looks like he's been in the weight room. And then you now have a legitimate dynamic running back duo in the backfield in Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor. And it took Jonathan Taylor a little bit to get going, but he has proven he's someone that can take you to the playoffs or put you in the playoff picture on his own. He can go out there and single-handedly wreck a defense, and I've seen him single-handedly take down the Buffalo Bills. So for the Indianapolis Colts, Shane Steichen should be really proud of him. If they make the playoffs, I think he should be in the Coach of the Year conversation, especially if someone like Brian Daboll, who was the first head coach, I feel like he had the worst record of any head coach previously to win Coach of the Year, if I'm not mistaken.
He had the worst record of a Coach of the Year since 1984.
Yeah. So if I'm an Indianapolis Colts fan, I feel inspired, especially you have the Jaguars and the Texans and now the Colts all coming up in this division. And then the Titans are kind of falling by the wayside with Will Levis. They don't really know what they're doing. So I think Indianapolis should be really encouraged, and you are in the playoff mix. So let's see them continue to improve week in and week out. Tampa Bay, do you think their playoff hopes are crushed after this loss, or do you think with how bad Atlanta has been so far in stretches this season, with Desmond Ridder still kind of being the guy now, and then how bad Derek Carr has been, and we'll get to that game after this one, do you think Tampa Bay still has a chance to make the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, they have a chance because they're still in the mix for the division. I don't see them winning a wild card spot because of teams like the Cowboys, the Seahawks, the Vikings, all teams that I think will be inevitably better at the end of the day, but they're still in the mix. I think that they're probably the third worst team, though. The third best team, I mean, in that division, because the Saints, the thing with all the three of these teams is that all of them are very clunky offensively, and defensively, it's like each week it's kind of a toss up how they play. The Bucs have the most talent on defense, but offensively, Baker Mayfield makes some really nice plays, but the offense stalls when it matters in the red zone. And I want to see them win the division. I'd rather see the Bucs than these other two teams. But at the same time, like next week, if they lose, they're probably out of it.
Yeah, next week, if they lose, you're probably out of it. It's going to be tough, but you still do have some matchups in the NFC South. I believe they're playing the Panthers next week, or somewhere Panthers, Saints, or Falcons. But I think if you can win out in your division, you still have a chance to make the playoffs. And for Baker Mayfield is probably playing the best football of his career. And I don't necessarily think the record is completely on Baker, because watching the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and just rewatching some film this week, going through their games, trying to figure out what exactly is wrong with that defense, some of it is Baker, yes, but most of it is just flat out drops. I've seen so many times this season, just going back and looking at the games where he hits Mike Evans and uncharacteristically Mike Evans drops the ball, even though he's struggling through injuries this year. Jordan Palmer, the rookie this year, he just had some flat out drops in this game that was pushing a comeback in this game. And really their drive stall out because one, you can't run the ball. Anytime you can't run the ball, then the defense is going to know what you're doing. And then just the combined drops of Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and Jordan Palmer. It's like some of it is Baker, yes, but I do lay a bulk of the blame on the wide receivers.
Yeah, I think Trey Palmer's been a big miss for them. And a couple of the wide receivers that people thought were going to pan out this year haven't really panned out. You've seen some of the top guys like Addison and Zay Flowers kind of be in the mix and be explosive, but I don't think that they hit with Trey Palmer here. And Mike, yeah, you're right about Mike Evans. I've seen him drop. I think he has 8 drops on the season, which is fairly high for him, for somebody who consistently been one of those guys. But there's a lot of things to go around. Their offensive line isn't great. Rachaad White is not the answer at running back. And really their highlights on their offense has really been Cade Otton, their tight end, who's played very well. And we still have Mike Evans, who's probably still going to have a 1,000-yard season. But outside of that, it's like, if you can game plan around Mike Evans, then the rest of the guys just don't really step up when it matters.
Yeah. And this is a Tampa Bay Buccaneers team. I feel like they can't win games unless they're holding teams under that 20-point threshold. And that's really when they have an opportunity to win. They got 20 points in this game, but they allow 27 points to the Colts on the road. And typically when you are on the road, your defense isn't going to translate as well. And teams are going to be able to put up points against you, especially because your front seven is really good. However, your secondary is still a problem for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I felt like in the Brady era, that was the major problem with the Bucs. So hopefully they can shore up some of those problems on offense. And if the receivers just stop dropping passes, I think they do have a chance to make the playoffs. But encouraged by the Colts, Shane Steichen should be really proud of himself. And then Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you're still in the mix, but got to rattle off some wins here, figure out that offense. And then we had the Battle of the South. A lot of people thought whoever won this game was going to win the division. We now have the Saints and the Atlanta Falcons, both 5-6. Saints looked like they were about to go up 10-0, kind of slam the door shut early on the Atlanta Falcons. And then right on cue, their free agent signing, Jesse Bates, pick 6, all the way down the field, throws up the peace sign. See you later. We're now at the top of the NFC South. I am glad you guys paid me that bag. And now you're glad you paid me that bag because I basically saved the season for the Saints on my own with the Atlanta Falcons. And then without that touchdown, Falcons still win this game. They put up 17 points in offense, which isn't enough, but I think the great thing about this game is that their head coach, Arthur Smith, he wasn't facing Bijan Robinson in fantasy this week. So he actually gave him the ball.
Yeah, this offense has been super frustrating. But first, I want to shout out Jesse Bates because Jesse Bates was all over the field this game.
Yeah.
He had a monster game. You know, outside of the pick 6, just making plays when it mattered. And the offense here, it's amazing what happens when you give it to your best guys. It's like the frustration that I had with the Steelers. I think the Falcons also fit that bill where it's like Bijan is definitely your best player on offense. So you should be feeding him the ball. You should be doing screens. You should be getting him the ball when it mattered. And I think he had 3 touchdowns in this game. So he balled out. He played a great game. And then outside of him, it's like Drake London is a fine receiver. He got banged up a little bit. And then outside of that, like the receivers aren't really spectacular, but this was just a classic NFC South game where just kind of a gritty game. 2 teams that stall on offense. Desmond Ridder back at the helm. Don't know what happened with Taylor Heineke at the mix. I guess they were playing around. I guess Desmond Ridder's the better fit, but I don't know. At the end of the day, Falcons win and they're leading this division. The 5-6 Falcons are in the playoffs.
Yeah, the 5-6 Falcons, and it's probably going to be an 8-9 team that wins the division again. Sadly, it's not going to be a team with a winning record, and I do think the Falcons probably bench Desmond Ridder. They're like, hey, can you stop being an idiot for a few weeks? And we're going to roll out Heineke. Heineke's going to show a burst at first, but we've seen it with Ryan Fitzpatrick. We've seen it with Josh Dobbs now. We've seen it now with Taylor Heineke, where and even Gardner Minshew at stretches where they come in their first few weeks, they light it up, and then they start to struggle once they figure out what they're doing on offense, and defenses can make those adjustments. And I thought we saw that with Taylor Heineke. So they're like, all right, we might as well throw our young guy out, Desmond Ridder, see if he can stop being stupid and throwing some of the dumbest interceptions I've ever seen, and then just missing wide open guys. So they're able to get the ball to Drake London, who has been vocally frustrated on this team. And then you spend a lot of money on that defense, and it finally showed up, because I felt like the Falcons defense has been inconsistent, but at home it's definitely been better. So now you have him, your secondary is playing well, and then you still have Grady Jarrett on that team who's been balling out. So Falcons got 24, and then the Saints, you still have a chance to win the division because you're still tied with them record wise. And I think the Saints definitely have a chance. Do you think they are able to come back and win the division and it's kind of Derek Carr's injury, or do you think Derek Carr is just bad?
I don't think Derek Carr's the answer by any means. If they're them, draft a quarterback, please, because he's not the answer. But yeah, they can still win. The loss of Michael Thomas, I think, will hurt them a little bit, because he was a nice dynamic piece next to Chris Olave. Chris Olave has really been the glue, and for some reason Taysom Hill also. But Alvin Kamara is really the way that the Saints win is feeding Alvin Kamara, and then when the defense kind of opens up, giving it to Chris Olave. But outside of that, it's like their offense just stalls way too much for this team that has a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. I think they can still win it, and maybe they should still be the favorites. But at the end of the day, like, I don't really think either team. I feel like this is a division where it's fine if none of them make it, honestly, because they all are just none of them are going to beat the Cowboys, and none of them are really going to put much up of a fight up, I don't think.
Yeah, even the Bears may be better than any of these teams with what they've shown the past few weeks. But yeah, I think the Saints, they're just clunky on offense. It's like Derek Carr trying to push the ball deep. And then whenever he's back, it's like, okay, now we're involving Taysom Hill. We don't really know what we're doing there. Alvin Kamara has played better, but outside of Chris Olave, they really haven't found that consistent number 2 receiver, even though Rashid Shaheed has been playing very well in some stretches here. And then Juwan Jennings was really good as well in this game at points.
Yeah, I just think that interested to see what they do moving forward. His contract is 4 years long, so they'll probably bring him back next year. But this is another team where, you know, Drew Brees moved on, and then since then it's been Andy Dalton, it's been Trevor Siemian, it's been Jameis Winston, and now Derek Carr. You're not one quarterback away. I get you're still competitive, but at the end of the day, like you guys got to figure out, maybe just go into a full rebuild at this point, because you have a lot of these guys that were on the Super Bowl roster. You have a Cam Jordan there who might retire by the end of the season, but I think it's time they just blow it up and just suck for a little bit.
Yeah, it's time for the Saints to take a step back, figure out what they're doing. Derek Carr definitely isn't the answer. And then you can have a rookie sit behind him for a few games and then pull the plug on Derek Carr. But this whole Jameis Winston still being on the team when he was supposed to be the guy to take the reins and then wasn't, and then it's flipping back and forth between him and Derek Carr. Don't think that's great for your team. And I don't think Derek Carr has been great for that locker room. And there's been some rumblings about that in the past. But Saints got to figure it out here. But we're staying in the NFC South. And I hope you're ready for where the Brickyard was right. And I hope you're ready for a history lesson today, because as you say, you're a history buff and we tend to be history buffs on the show. And the Carolina Panthers, we just got the news on Monday that they fired Frank Reich. He's now the second shortest tenure at head coach. And you ask, what head coach has lasted longer than Frank Reich? Oh, I know. Urban Meyer, you know, the guy who's going to Ohio clubs after the Jacksonville Jaguars game, going to his old stomping ground
and finger gunning a middle-aged mom.
Yeah, finger gunning a middle-aged mom. Even the Jacksonville Jaguars held on to him longer than Frank Reich. And it's just a testament to how boring and uninspiring Frank Reich was. And I saw this coming. Frank Reich was my least favorite hiring of any head coach. I'm like, you want to develop a young quarterback and you hire Frank Reich, failed quarterback. Josh McCown, failed quarterback. Also Frank Reich, failed head coach. He comes from Philadelphia, goes to Indianapolis. They're like, all right, he's going to implement some of what Doug Peterson is doing. He's going to go out there, fix Carson Wentz, because he was definitely the one that coached Carson Wentz to a potential MVP season if he doesn't get hurt that year. Not Doug Peterson, right? Well, clearly everything that was happening in Philadelphia was Doug Peterson, because what Doug Peterson did was fix Urban Meyer, the guy that lasted longer than Frank Reich. Doug Peterson goes to Jacksonville, fixes that mess, wins a playoff game. What Frank Reich does, goes to Jacksonville against that Urban Meyer team, and then has one of the most horrendous coaching performances I've ever seen. Everyone's like, Carson Wentz sucks. Let's blame it all on Carson Wentz, even though statistically Carson Wentz had a pretty good season, and most teams would be happy staying with that guy.
27 touchdowns, 7 picks.
And then you bring in Phillip Rivers on that team. You have one of the best rosters on that team consistently, and then Frank Reich consistently underachieves on that team, brings in Matt Eberflus as his defensive coordinator. You wonder why the Colts defense was consistently underachieving. Well, it was the combination of Frank Reich being boring, uninspiring, and Matt Eberflus, who clearly just won his first game in his division as a head coach with the Chicago Bears. And
3 years in.
3 years in. So Frank Reich, I always thought he was an underachiever. I always thought he was very uninspiring. I could not get through an entire Hard Knocks episode with him because he was just putting me to sleep, along with Carson Wentz and his family just not being interested in that. But you thought it was a good idea to develop your young quarterback. When Frank Reich, what was he supposed to do? Oh yeah, fix Carson Wentz. Couldn't do that. Develop a quarterback in Indianapolis, develop a winning culture in Indianapolis, and he couldn't do that. And then you bring him into Carolina, and then you fire him. You fire him at week 12. He couldn't even last longer than Urban Meyer. So this is a complete disaster for the Carolina Panthers. And then for Frank Reich, this is a guy that is just like a used car scammer, because what he did to the Carolina Panthers was an absolute scam. And you know why? I'm going to pull up the numbers of his contract, because not only are you still paying Matt Rule until 2026, you're paying Frank Reich, who signed a 4-year contract through 2026. David Tepper will be on the hook for an estimated $9 million per season for the next 3 years. He's paying him $25,000 a day to not be the head coach. The Raiders wouldn't do this last year with Josh McDaniels because they were too cheap. Well, the Carolina Panthers, credit to them for not being too cheap, but you got scammed by Frank Reich. Mr. I'm a former quarterback. I'll help out Bryce Young here. And then as soon as he was like, sometimes, owner is involved, and then sometimes they take a step back and they let you run your team and build the roster how you want to. I'm like, this guy of all people is calling out someone in the front office who is going to clearly axe you at the end of the year and get you fired. You don't want to be in the bad graces of the front office. You want to be a likable personality. Yeah, I'm on board with whatever you're doing. I'm happy to be here because I was already a bad head coach in Indianapolis. You're the one taking shots at the owner and the GM saying you wanted CJ Stroud. As soon as I said that, I was like, oh, this guy wants out and this guy doesn't want to be there and he's getting fired this year. So was I surprised he was fired midseason? A little bit. Was I surprised he was fired by the end of the year? No, because I saw this coming. I always thought this was a bad hire.
It was a bad hire. And now the context with Frank Reich is the last 22 games of Frank Reich, he is 4-17-1, which shows that he is in the same class as someone like a Hugh Jackson, who is just anemic as a head coach. And you talk about Bill Belichick, right? And how maybe he should keep his job because he's a defensive coordinator and his style is on defense and he still has a great defense. Well, Frank Reich is an offensive-minded guy, and they have the worst offense in the NFL. That's worse than the Tommy DeVito-led Giants, worse than the Mac Jones-led Patriots. You have the worst offense, and this is a team that had Bryce Young, who everyone said was the most NFL-ready quarterback in this draft. And I'm not here to bang the drum on Bryce Young. I think getting him out of a situation that has a failing head coach, a failing quarterbacks coach in Josh McCown, and then even Deuce Staley should not have been in there as a running backs coach either. I feel bad for Chuba Hubbard. Sorry, Chuba Hubbard. Sorry, Miles Sanders. But he has the second shortest NFL head coaching tenure of all time. And you think, well, who was worse than him? 1978, 49ers head coach. I don't even care about his name. It doesn't matter. But
get your history books out.
He traded 5 first-round picks before the season. And they traded a first-round pick for Orenthal James Simpson. And you're thinking, well, O.J. Simpson, one of the greatest running backs of all time. No. Yes, but no. His last season was with the 49ers. Spent a majority of his career with the Buffalo Bills, right? This is the equivalent of this, and this is the head coach that is almost as bad as Frank Reich. Traded O.J. Simpson, what would be equivalent to trading Tennessee Titans version Adrian Peterson. Washed at that point. No offense to Orenthal. He was 3 years removed from being requested the role of Terminator. So he ended up panning out pretty well until 1994. But that's where he's compared to. And don't forget that team ended up having the most turnovers in NFL history in a 14-game stretch. 63 turnovers in 14 games. You probably think.
Was that before or after the murder trial?
The Niners thing?
Yeah.
Oh, way before.
Okay.
Yeah, no, Orenthal didn't do it for about, or acquitted. He wasn't accused of, I should say, for the next 16 years. So maybe that's what led him to murder, is having to coach with that guy. Anyways, but yeah, Frank Reich, failure as head coach, and it seemed to be what they deemed to be the most safe hire, but it didn't. I mean, look at how these other coaches are going, right? Shane Steichen for the Colts panned out. They're in the playoffs right now. The Texans with D'Amico Ryans, their defense playing very well, and they're in the playoff mix at the same time. Frank Reich's hire has been an absolute disaster. We've banged on the drum about how bad this trade was to get Bryce Young, not even because of Bryce Young himself, because give him a chance with somebody else, anybody else. But you bang the drum, you could potentially have ruined the career of Bryce Young at this point with the trajectory that he is on, especially being picked right before CJ Stroud, making everybody CJ proud in this situation. What an absolute train wreck. Best believe when the top 5 worst teams list comes, I will not be kind to those Carolina Panthers, especially because since 2015, that's right, the 2015 season, 15-1 Patriot, makes it to the Super Bowl, loses to the Broncos. They have the 4th worst record in the NFL, and they are in the same class as the lowly New York Giants, the lowly New York Jets, and the Jacksonville Jaguars, who of course rebounded since then. And you go back to Mr. TJ Watt and what he did to that poor Carolina's team, literally ruining the entire franchise of the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, the Carolina Panthers were 6-2 until that fateful Thursday night where TJ Watt lays a hit out on Cam Newton. Cam Newton was in the middle of throwing the ball, and then as he was coming forward, TJ Watt digs his helmet into the shoulder, which is why the injury was so egregious, and then drives him into the ground, basically ruining Cam Newton's career after he was allowed to basically get jumped by Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware in the Super Bowl. And then the next game, they're pretty much doing the exact same thing because I believe they rematched week 1 and then they were still holding him up. And then Cam Newton got hit in the head multiple times in that game, and it wasn't called roughing the quarterback, where if you sneeze on Zach Wilson and he falls over, it's a roughing the quarterback penalty, and he's not even a good player. Cam Newton was one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He was the face of the league the year previous, and then you're not protecting this guy. You're 6-2. TJ Watt pile drives and basically ends the Carolina Panthers' success. Cam Newton was never the same after that hit, and they were 6-2 after that hit. They went 1-7. So you finish out the year 7-9 after that hit without Cam Newton, and it's just been bad quarterback situation. You hire Matt Rule after Ron Rivera. Okay, Mr. I don't know when my team is eligibly eliminated from the playoffs. Yeah, that guy. After him, you hire the college bumpkin himself. Then you pay him again. So you sign him to a 7-year contract worth $60 million that is still paying him an annual base salary of $8.5 million until 2026.
So if you think about it, they're paying Matt Rule and Frank Reich $50,000 a day to not be their head coach. And you think like, well, where could that money have been allocated, right? Because, $9 million a year, just about $17 million a year. How much money is DJ Moore making? $20 million a year. So literally the reason why they can't pay who would have been a perfect piece for Bryce Young and probably could have made Bryce Young, I don't think he would have been rookie of the year, but he could at least looked like the rookie of the year.
Yeah.
Nope. Instead, you have to pay Matt Rule, who now coaches in college, and Frank Reich, who now is working at Burger King. And that's what they're doing because they couldn't have DJ Moore. So congratulations, Carolina Panthers. You guys are revoked from having the cat orchestra. You guys are the kitty cats at this point. Carolina kitty cats.
Carolina kitty cats. Yeah. I mean, the Panthers, I don't even know if they're as useful as your cat.
Yes. Keep in mind for the viewers who don't know, My cat is 16 years old, 84 in cat years, and about 437 pounds.
Yeah, and this cat can still kill a mouse. I don't think the Panthers could kill a mouse. And the other thing about Frank Reich, the last thing I'll say, your specialty is offense, and your defense was still good this year. Frankie Luvu, JC Horn on that team, still balling out. You still have Brian Burns, and then just the fact that you bring in Adam Thielen, bring in Hayden Hurst, and then Josh McCown also axed and gone off this team. So we'll see, but the Panthers have been the fourth worst team since that Cam Newton hit in the NFL, with the likes of the Jacksonville Jaguars, with the likes of the New England Patriots, the New York Giants, and other teams. Fourth worst record in the NFL over the past few years. And I don't think it's getting any better anytime soon,
worse.
Unless you get a full overhaul. And then, I don't know, instead of a safe hire, which is just a dumb hire for a head coach, why don't you go out there and get an actual head coach? But no, what are they going to do? Probably going to go out there, hire someone who gets fired this year, and then immediately give him an opportunity. Maybe they call up Jim Harbaugh, see what he's doing. Matt Eberflus, see what he's doing. Dan Orlovsky, are you free to come coach our team and be a mentor for a backup quarterback? Tell him how not to run out of an end zone. So Panthers, you got a lot of work to do. Titans, Will Levis sucks. You got to figure out something there, but you're going to be the worst team in your division. And then moving on, because I'm more interested in any other team in the AFC South than the Tennessee Titans, I want to talk about the battle that was the Jacksonville Jaguars in Houston redeeming themselves. I believe you picked the Texans in this game. I picked the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I was saying the Jacksonville Jaguars to be contenders in the AFC, to crown themselves the perennial favorites in the AFC South, have to be able to go on the road to Houston, to a team that blew them out, where everything went wrong in that game. Everyone contributed a fumble, whether it is Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, or Trevor Lawrence turning the ball over, whether it was getting a field goal blocked in that game and returned by the Houston Texans. Everyone had to chip in the opposite direction and make a contribution. And the surprise player of the game, Dearness Johnson, coming out of nowhere in this game with a massive play. We loved him in Cleveland, and we were like, Dearness Johnson, he should get another opportunity. And so far, he's looked better than Tank Bigsby has in any of the games. Tank Bigsby is basically put on special teams at this point. And then you had Travis Etienne stepping up in this game, Calvin Ridley having another game with a touchdown, and then the Jaguars go out there, get it done, and then their defense was able to step up, slow down the Houston Texans, hold them to 21 points at home, and then the Jaguars go there, basically solidify themselves as the winner of the AFC South, sitting at the top at 8-3 right now, with the potential to eclipse the Ravens for the 1 seed so far this year, with the injury of Mark Andrews and the Chiefs' struggles on offense. So do you think this was more Jacksonville Jaguars needed to get this game done, or do you think the Texans' magic is just wearing off a little bit?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that, so for the Jags, they actually had the 1 seed for about 4 hours before the Ravens got the win against the Chargers. And I think it's a testament to the Jaguars for a team that, for me, they don't really feel like they jump off the screen for me. Yeah. Like, they have the talent there. Trevor Lawrence I think he has 12 touchdowns on the year.
9.
But it's like, you have all this talent around you, and it doesn't feel like they really, like, they don't really impress me, but they also don't disappoint me either. They just seem to be like just a fine football team that keeps winning games. And now they are 8-3. So they don't really, like I mentioned, they don't really super impress me overall, but they have for a period of time the 1 seed. I think they're capable of having the 1 seed, which we predicted on the show. And if history repeats itself, as it often does, they could potentially get that 1 seed. But for the Texans, I think that they're a team that they did beat up on a couple of struggling teams. And I don't think that they're a bad team by any means, but we mentioned that they're not quite there yet, where they don't quite have, they have Tank Dell, and CJ Stroud has proven to be a very good quarterback, top 10 quarterback in the league at this point. But I don't think it's their year. I'd like to see them sneak into the playoffs, but I think that their magic has worn off a little bit, because as we get into the most pivotal point of the season, I do see them losing a few more games and potentially falling out of the race.
Yeah. And with Trevor Lawrence, he's kind of an enigma at this point, because there was a stretch of time where they're at the goal line. They end up getting the touchdown, but he missed like 3 plays where he was just like a half a second late. And it seems like some of the plays, Trevor is just a step late, where I see him make some incredible throws. but there's also times where he just flat out misses a guy or he just doesn't put the ball in the right place. But at sometimes he's really explosive, is on time, is able to fit the ball in all of those tight windows and be accurate. But there were some times in this game where he had Evan Ingram open, who hasn't had a touchdown so far. And Trevor Lawrence has said, yeah, I'm well aware of that because he's in my ear week in and week out. And then we have some times where he misses Calvin Ridley down the field. So do you think Trevor Lawrence is going through some growing pains and it makes him not elite? Or do you think he's just kind of hard to read at this point in his career?
He's extremely hard to read because last year, his statistics were right up there with Patrick Mahomes from week 9 on. He's elite. He's definitely an elite quarterback and he's a franchise guy and the Jags are in a great position moving forward. However, he's just a weird guy to read because the numbers don't jump off the screen, but when you watch him play, you see it. He makes these massive throws that I think him and maybe 2 or 3 other guys can make.
Right.
But at the end of the day, if you're a stats guy, if you're a numbers guy, you look at Trevor Lawrence, you're like, is he elite? Because his numbers aren't elite this year. And he's got all the talent around him. He's got Doug Peterson, who's a top head coach in the league. So they got everything around him that he needs. It's not a bad organization by any means at this point. So he's an enigma. That's definitely an enigma for me.
Yeah.
I know he's good. I know he's elite. I know that he's in that conversation, but like he still has stuff. He still has something to prove for me.
Yeah. I think with Trevor, the best thing about him was what he showed versus the Chargers that you can point to is just his football. I love it. And I love everything football has given to me. But like, if I lose a game, is it going to affect me? No. So he kind of just goes out there, forgets what happened the last play. And it gave him the ability to throw 4 interceptions and he wasn't rattled. He just has that cool surfer bro mentality. He's like, yeah, I'm going to go out there, keep pressing. And it's not, if he turns the ball over, it doesn't affect any of his other decisions that he makes throughout the game. So I think in a playoff run, when he could be going up against a team like the Baltimore Ravens, where Lamar Jackson definitely gets in his head at some points, especially with the leads that the Ravens have blown, or another team in the playoffs where maybe their quarterback isn't as emotionally grounded as Trevor Lawrence. I think that is his greatest strength, where even when they do fall behind or when they're in a little bit of a tumultuous situation, he's kind of like, yeah, whatever. It's cool, bro.
Yeah, I agree. But I do think that he's going to have, maybe it's next year he makes that stride where he does push. I think it's inevitable at some point he does win an MVP.
Yeah, I think he does win it at some point. But I think comparing him and Josh Allen, because I think Trevor Lawrence is better at being a quarterback than Josh Allen, where he's not going to press. He's not going to make some of those silly mistakes that Josh Allen will make. But Josh Allen does look more elite sometimes. But I feel like Josh Allen, you can see some of the panic and fear in his eyes when he's going through some of his progressions. But he's never had like any of those massive whiffs that Josh Allen has had.
Yeah, I think if we're comparing the two, because I think both of them are in that top 5 to top 7 conversation at this point. Josh Allen jumps off the screen more for me, and his ceiling is higher. Like when you see him at his best, he looks like Superman. But at his lows, he is one of the worst. Like you see him statistically wise, when he has a bad game, he's missing throws, he's making bad interceptions, he's making just bad overall plays as a whole. And so I think like Josh Allen has higher highs, but lower lows.
Yeah, and that's fair. And I'm excited to see how the Jaguars progress throughout the season. They have another game on Monday Night Football where they get to face off at home against the Cincinnati Bengals without Joe Burrow. So we'll see how that game goes. They get an extra day of rest there. However, you're a history buff, so get ready for some more history to be dropped on you in this segment, because the Rams and Cardinals faced off in this game. And then you're like, what do the Rams look like without Cooper Kupp? Well, he ended up playing in this game after being banged up last game. And I thought just something about the Rams versus Cardinals. I thought the Rams would be able to go into Glendale, Arizona and take care of business. Did I think it would be 37-14? No, I did not. And then you have some incredible stats on Sean McVay versus the Arizona Cardinals. That's just pretty flooring to any viewer who isn't aware of it.
Okay. So I think that, when you face each other as often as you do, you're in a division, you face each other twice a year, one away, one at home. And usually in most divisional matchups, like, whether it be Steelers and Ravens or whatever it be, it's competitive, right? The Rams and Cardinals, Sean McVay is 13-2 against them since he started as a head coach. He has won 60% of his games as an NFL head coach. If you take out the Cardinals, he has won 54% of his games. So he literally, his winning percentage
6%.
jumps 6%. He's won 18% of his games against the Cardinals at this point. The Cardinals, and I know the Cardinals have been bad for a good chunk of that time because that's after the Carson Palmer era, and that's like the Josh Rosen and stuff. But the Cardinals, as an organization, have some goddamn self-respect for yourself. You're talking about a team, you don't want to be in the Jets conversation with how they've been against the Patriots the last 15 years. You don't want to be like how the Bills were with the Patriots back in the day, or better yet, the Broncos against the Chiefs outside of this last game. You don't want to be in that conversation. It's pathetic. This is a divisional foe. This is one of your biggest rivals that you face every single season. 2-13 against Sean McVay, and this is a Rams team that I know that they're still fighting for a playoff spot and they're competitive and you're not, but have some goddamn self-respect for yourself, guys. Give me a break. Since 2017, you've won 2 games against them? That's embarrassing.
Yeah, especially for the Cardinals. It's like your defense has played better than most people thought, but the fact that you go at home and put up 14 points versus the LA Rams is just crazy to me. And the other bizarre thing about the Los Angeles Rams this season is their record is 5-6, right? So they are 4-1 in divisional play this year. 4-1, which is crazy. The only team they've lost to, you can already guess it, the San Francisco 49ers. And that game was a lot more competitive than a lot of people thought. It was in SoFi, which is a home away from home for the San Francisco 49ers, because who would have thought that no one in LA really cares about football? And most of the people there are either San Francisco 49ers fans, Patriots fans, or Cowboys transplants. So it's basically the San Francisco 49ers home away from home. So Rams don't really have an advantage there, but they're 4-1 in their division, and they are 1-5 outside of divisional play this year.
Yeah, that's so they're not a playoff team. They can't be. They can't beat anybody outside of their division. And keep in mind that the Seahawks, they see them every year. He has the most wins as against anybody against Pete Carroll. And then you have the lowly Cardinals that you get to beat up on. And now you have the San Francisco 49ers. And I think they face each other one more time before the season's over. And maybe they split because they usually do. But overall, it's like the Rams just offensively, it's just anemic most of the time. And I feel like they're a very easy team to game plan for.
Yeah, and the team they did beat outside of the division was the Indianapolis Colts. And that game, if you remember, went to overtime. And it was also the Anthony Richardson game. Mm-hmm. So that was another game too. They were up and Anthony Richardson had like a 16-point comeback in the fourth quarter. They almost blow that game, get to overtime, but they got the ball first in that game. So if the Colts get the ball first, it could have gone a very different way.
Yeah, they could be 4-7.
Yeah, but Rams continue to dominate within their division. Their playoff hopes are a little bit weird to me. We have them in that 8-9, 9-8 range, which they'll probably hit because they're 5-6 right now, maybe a tick below that. But overall, if you can't beat any teams outside of your division and it takes overtime to beat Anthony Richardson, who's a rookie quarterback, and you almost lose that game, I don't think you're going anywhere too fast here. But then we have the Chiefs versus the Raiders. Raiders had their new look team. They were hyped about it. And then all of a sudden they realized, oh yeah, Aiden O'Connell actually kind of sucks at football.
Yeah, he's not the guy.
No.
We've seen that before. And this team, the real headline from this game is like the Raiders seem to have a different identity without Josh McDaniels, and Antonio Pierce has stepped in and given them a bit of a grittier side of football. Do you think that they should keep Antonio Pierce next season as their head coach?
Yeah, I mean, I want to see him with a different quarterback, but I think their defense has played better. I think they still are a little bit undermanned on defense. You did just cut Marcus Peters, but you have to figure out some continuity on offense. I think you should do Devontae Adams a favor and trade him away. I think you should do Josh Jacobs a favor and trade him if you're not planning on giving him a long-term deal. It's like stringing someone along in either like a business opportunity or a relationship when you have one foot in, one foot out the door. It's like the best thing to do would just be to say, hey, we're not planning on giving you a long-term deal there. So why don't we find you a trade partner there so we can get you to a destination you actually want to be, instead of just stringing Josh Jacobs along, instead of just wasting the last few prime years that Devontae Adams have. The Chiefs, I know, need receivers, even if they are in salary cap hell. Maybe a team maybe he would be open to a reunion with the Green Bay Packers and playing with Jordan Love. Some team where you can get some of these guys involved. Chiefs offense had a reinvigoration, but I think with the Raiders, give Antonio Pierce another shot. It seems like the players really like him. The fact that Max Crosby really digs his vibe should be check mark for you. Like, okay, he does fit the organization. It's time for someone to reinstall the Raiders mantra of being the black and silver. We're going to be a badass team that kicks you in the mouth. So Antonio Pierce is rooted in that culture because he grew up in Oakland and he does know the culture of the Raiders. And I think he could bring some of that to them. So give him at least another year. If you're going to give Josh McDaniels a chance.
Yeah. And it seems like, when they fired John Gruden, they had, Rich Bisaccia, the organization liked him and we all felt like they should have given him an opportunity. I'm like, when I make this comparison, you might think of it as blasphemy, but hear me out. I think that with the aura around the Raiders, a bit of a cursed franchise, there was another head coach that they hired, not the Raiders, but another team a couple of years back who have been kind of a cursed franchise. They had this guy come in who played for them and who had, had his success there and really kind of fit the culture of Detroit. I'm not saying he's Dan Campbell. However, he has played for the Raiders. He believes in the Raiders. He loves the Raiders. And while I don't think he'll have the same success that Dan Campbell has, I think that they should give him there because he fits the culture of what the Raiders are and what the fan base wants. And I think that he would really help them kind of reinvent themselves over the last 20 years where they've been probably the worst team in NFL.
Yeah, I could see that. And I could definitely kind of see the vibe where it's Dan Campbell, where he's definitely alpha who's jacked, but he's also a smarter player on that team and was able to reinvigorate the defense. He's going around, make sure he says hi to every single player before the game and then gets them hyped up. But yeah, you should have ridden it with Rick Bisaccia, see what he could have given you another year. Antonio Pierce isn't going to be the most expensive guy, especially when you're strapped for cash because you're still paying John Gruden after the email scandal that he had talking about tires. And then you have the Josh McDaniels scandal, just being a bad head coach who hasn't been good ever since he cheated there. So yeah, you're already strapped for cash, so might as well see what he got. And the players seem to like him, so it's not like they're going to be, how could you give him another chance? They'd probably be even more upset if you didn't give him that chance.
Yeah, and we all know they probably won't hire him because it's the Raiders' MO.
But then we had the Buffalo Bills heading to Philadelphia. We both had Philadelphia in this game. Didn't think it'd be as competitive in this game, but we had to hear the Bills whine and scream and pout because why can't we get the ball first in overtime? It's not fair. Well, you're 0-5 now, so clearly it doesn't matter in that game. And then I get if it's just the playoffs, but for the regular season, the game should just be over. You can't muster up more than just a field goal in this game. And then Josh Allen, pretty much everyone is saying what a great game Josh Allen played, and he played an incredible game. The difference in that game ended up being the turnover. Jalen Hurts had a turnover in the Super Bowl, so not going to give him too much grief there, but I did say with the Eagles, really the difference was Jalen Hurts turning it over. That was the reason why they lost. In this game, Josh Allen turns the ball over. That ends up being the difference, even though he did hit Dalvin Cook on a play where, not Dalvin Cook, James Cook on a play where he could have walked into the end zone, and then just him and Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis has been your nemesis on that show. You hate Gabe Davis so much for no reason, even though he is the best blocking receiver in the NFL right now. And then you seem to think that that doesn't matter, even though it opens up so many plays out of the backfield and in the screen game. But Gabe Davis had a pretty good game, and then him and Josh Allen just can't connect. And then we'll never know, was it Josh Allen making a bad read, or did Gabe Davis just not turn the ball around? So do you blame Josh Allen for the loss, or are you blaming Gabe Davis here?
I feel like there's a bigger picture there, but if I had to pinpoint on that particular play, I'm giving it to Gabe Davis. I'm giving him the blame. Josh Allen, this game, like we talk about his highs, this game, for a portion of this game, he was that Superman character that he can play when he plays his best football. He did have a great game. He made a lot of big runs, made some big throws, Stephon Diggs getting involved. And there was 2 opportunities in overtime to score a touchdown. And Gabe Davis's play, that was a touchdown, and they had that opportunity. Now, I think there's blame on both sides for that and that particular situation, but I am going to point to Gabe Davis. I understand he can block, and that's great. I'm so happy he can.
That is great.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, look at what the tight ends do. Like, look at what Cole Kmet, what luxury he is. Look at what some other guys can do to really help that run game, because James Cook has been playing pretty well with that situation. But as a wide receiver, there's two things you need to do. You need to block. Check. You need to catch. Oh, you didn't catch it. You're not, I don't know. Maybe don't pay Gabe Davis at that point.
He got a touchdown in the game.
Yeah, he could have had two. He could have had even more. So whoever started him in fantasy could have been even happier with that situation. Gabe Davis hater. He's just not a number two. He's not a number two. He just doesn't. He either misreads or he just flat out drops a lot of these balls. I think he has like 13 drops this year or something like that. He's not the guy. He's not the number two. He's going to be a great Carolina Panther someday, but he's not the answer. They should go out and get another, like a better number two. If you can afford him, which you probably can't, get Amari Cooper if you can. Or if Stephon Diggs decides to stay, go out and get another guy to work with him. Even like an Elijah Moore would work better in this case.
Yeah.
But it's not like Gabe Davis is just not the answer at this point.
And then Philadelphia Eagles in this game. What we said coming into this game is that the Philadelphia Eagles are the anti-Bills, where the Bills will make all the big explosive plays and then just have this masterclass. But when it comes down to it, the Philadelphia Eagles are going to be the team that makes all the little adjustments. They're going to be the team that makes any clutch situation. They're going to make the play where the Bills are probably going to have to settle for a field goal. And then the Eagles end up going ahead and getting the touchdown this game. Jalen Hurts, anytime he is called upon, anytime he is needed, the definition of valuable is that, because anytime you need Jalen Hurts to rise to the occasion this year, with the exception of the Jets game, and you are allowed to have a bad game, it is allowed. Jalen Hurts goes out there, balls out this game. Devontae Smith gets involved in this game. AJ Brown gets involved in this game. And then it was a game where the run game wasn't doing too well. Jason Kelce had to go to the bathroom because he kept false starting because he had to shit his pants in this game. And that was a play that set him back. But the Philadelphia Eagles were able to press on offense and make the play that we knew they would make. And then their defense was able to come up with a stop when they needed to make a stop. And we said that would be the difference in this game, because when you're a head coach and your specialty is offense, or your specialty is defense, we should see that shine. We should see that come through. And then there were times where you'd been able to stop the Eagles in this game. But when it comes down to it, whenever the Buffalo Bills need a big stop, you can count on them to not get it, because their coach is uninspiring and frankly does not know how to make adjustments to stop a team at the end of the game, especially in overtime. And we've seen that, I don't know, the last 6 times they've been in overtime.
Do you think that Sean McDermott is the Frank Reich of defensive head coaches? Like he's the defensive coach, Frank Reich?
I wouldn't go that far, because Sean McDermott has shown that he can build a playoff team that can compete at least and consistently win the division, where Frank Reich has not shown that. So I'm not going to go that blasphemous, and it's not fair to Sean McDermott, but yeah, it's kind of on that level. But also Frank Reich hasn't had someone like Josh Allen, so we can't really say.
Yeah, I just think that the Bills, now they're 6-6, and they went from a 71% chance to a 29% chance to make the playoffs after this game. And their schedule is brutal to end the season. They face a team like the Cowboys. They face a Dolphins team. They face the Chiefs, I believe. So they have a bunch of playoff teams that they have to face. I think the Ravens are in that mix as well. Their season's over at this point. I don't think that they're able to rattle off, 3, if they have what, 5 games left. If they can win 4 of those games, that's great. But I think they win probably 2 of them. And Sean McDermott's out the door. You probably see Stephon Diggs leave, and this team crumbling fast.
Yeah, this team's crumbling fast. And then Dan Orlovsky after the game said, what the Philadelphia Eagles have done this season is New England and Brady-esque, where it seems like anytime they're in a close game, they're able to make the adjustments similarly to how the Patriots have done that, especially with Brady. You never felt like the Patriots were out. And then anytime Brady touched the ball, it was pretty much a lock that the game was going to be over, or they're going to make the big play on defense, make that adjustment, or on offense. Do you think there is a little bit to that with how they've been winning games this year?
Yeah, I mean, they have the best record over the last 2 seasons, comparable to the 05-06 Colts. So I think that, when I think about this Eagles team, Patriots-esque, kind of hard to say. I feel like the Patriots name is constantly thrown around because of that's kind of the standard, but they absolutely are. I mean, they've been the most dominant team the last 2 years with how they started last year. They started off 8-0, and now they're 10-1 this season. And really what I'm interested to see for the Eagles Last year, they made it to the Super Bowl, lost to the Chiefs in a very close game that could have gone either way. If the Eagles can go down and win the Super Bowl this year, then at that point, with Jalen Hurts, like we have to start talking about him in the real conversation. Because I think at this point, you could easily put him at number 2 for best quarterback in the league. Patrick Mahomes still deserving at number 1, but they've been the most dominant team the last 2 years.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that. And Jalen Hurts has been a guy that's stepped up and rose to the occasion every single time. But excited to see how they do in the playoffs this year. You still do have to win a Super Bowl to be in a conversation with a team like the Patriots. But going through the last few games here, I want to talk about the Baltimore Ravens the most out of these last few games. Ravens go up against the Chargers, and really until that Zay Flowers game, this was an ugly game for them on offense against the Chargers defense that has underperformed and underachieved. And I feel like in this game, the most we saw them miss Mark Andrews, especially on offense and especially on those big third downs when they really needed someone to step up and make a play. It did look like the Baltimore Ravens do miss Mark Andrews right now, and it looks like it's going to pull that offense back a step because he is Lamar Jackson's safety blanket. So I do think with the loss of Mark Andrews, I need to see it play out a little bit more, but for now, it kind of takes the Baltimore Ravens out of my Super Bowl bubble, especially with some of the struggles that they've had with Lamar Jackson once they've got to the playoffs and once we get into that legitimate football where everyone is honing in their entire game plan, has that full season of tape, especially without Mark Andrews. They'll know how to slow down Zay Flowers, OBJ, if he's there at that point, and Nelson Aguilar of all people.
Yeah, I think when they had Mark Andrews, they had more ways to win because you have Gus Edwards, you have Justice Hill, and you have Lamar Jackson as the running game. But you also had people like Mark Andrews who could get open pretty much every single play. And that opened up the game for Zay Flowers, for Nelson Aguilar, for Odell, Rashad Bateman. But with him gone, now it's easier to stop them. So I feel like you're going to see a lot more games like what you saw with the Chargers game, where it's going to be a 20-17, 17-14 kind of game where their offense really going to get maybe 2 touchdowns a game. And then their defense has to hold them to like 17 points for them to win.
Yeah, and this was Zay Flowers' first touchdown, I believe.
Yeah, Zay Flowers has played great this year, and I think he's got a lot of potential, but they're going to have to really lean on Zay Flowers and Isaiah Likely, who has played well. He played well when Mark Andrews went down last year, and I think he can definitely fill in, but filling in for someone's shoes as big as Mark Andrews, it's going to be hard for them to do that. If he can, then they'll still be fine, but they're a team that has a way to win now at this point, where before I feel like they had a lot of different ways to win.
Yeah, so Baltimore Ravens without Mark Andrews, looks like their offense definitely did take a step back. Team that has taken a step forward, started out 1-5, kind of reminds me of that Alex Smith Chiefs year when the Chiefs started 1-5 and then inevitably made that push to the playoffs. And then I think that was the year they blew the 4 touchdown lead to the Indianapolis Colts and Andrew Luck. They go to Cleveland. We've seen their offense be good, kind of slowly getting better week in and week out. But this was the first time we saw that offense really explode versus the Cleveland Browns. Russell Wilson really came out of his own. Seemed like Sean Payton unlocked the playbook. Cortland Sutton is playing well. Javonte Williams is finally shaking off that catastrophic knee injury he had last year. So Denver Broncos, their defense is back to what it was last year. They got rid of all the older players, are letting their young players step up, and now finally opening up the offense where it looks like Denver is actually a real home field advantage right now. They're able to stop Cleveland, which is a really good running and screen team. They weren't letting any of that fly in this game. And then Russell Wilson was able to cook against the best defense in the league.
Yeah, so this is a game where I now believe in the Broncos, where they have been on the worst top 5 teams. They played anemic the first half of the season. And when we picked this game last week, I was a little bit more leaning towards the Browns because that Broncos offense had been really clunky. But I give a lot of credit to Russ for how well he played. I give a lot of credit to Cortland Sutton. And I give a lot of credit to the defense because the defense was kind of what was dragging them down the first 6 weeks. And now they're 6-5. They've won 5 straight games. They're the hottest team in the NFL, longest winning streak in the NFL. And now they're in the playoff mix, which they kind of came from the grave and now they're back. So I give a lot of credit to them. And if their offense could play like it played on Sunday for the rest of the time, then they could potentially win the next, say, 4 of the last 5 games and end up being like a 10-7 or 9-8.
Yeah, and then if we get a Dolphins-Broncos matchup, and I think the NFL would want that, where the Miami Dolphins have to face off against the Denver Broncos, where they get a chance to right that wrong of letting 70 points get dropped on their head. I do believe that the Broncos could win that game because at this point, I still believe in Russell Wilson because he has the experience over Tua. Yeah, I would still believe that the Broncos, especially with Sean Payton versus Mike McDaniel, Sean Payton is that elite head coach and their offense finally getting back to normal. So credit to the Broncos for scrapping and clawing out of the grave. And I think they can make a push for a wild card spot, but need to see them get tested again. But for the Cleveland Browns, tough loss. Myles Garrett, he got injured, said he hurt his shoulder pop. Kevin Stefanski said, though, all the x-rays were negative. There's no structural damage to his shoulder. And right now he's just dealing with some soreness. However, some people are a little bit wary of that because of what he said about Deshaun Watson. He was acting like Deshaun was going to play. Then it wasn't until Sunday that they realized he wasn't able to go. So still aren't sure because Kevin Stefanski has messed up with injuries before with the media and giving them the disclosure. So I think with that would be a huge blow and then would want me to see the Browns fall out of the playoff mix, especially if their best player isn't 100% go.
Yeah, that's going to really hurt their defense. And the defense has been fantastic, but you lose Myles Garrett, you probably lose. You're going to fall down the rankings. You just can't lose someone as valuable as he is.
Yeah, and for the Vikings and Bears, I'll save my breath because if you go out on national television on Monday Night Football and it's 12-10 and the Bears get 4 turnovers and they end up finding a way to fall behind. Justin Fields has 2 turnovers. Neither of you deserve my time of day to talk about you because this was an embarrassment where you have basically, I really don't ever hear anything Joe Buck or Troy Aikman says, but when I start hearing subtle roasts from Troy Aikman, that's when you know this game is just horrendous.
This game, you know how I always make fun of the 49ers and Broncos game last year?
Yeah.
This is the new 49ers Broncos game. Bears and Vikings. Josh Dobbs throws 4 interceptions, has a bit of a Ryan Fitzpatrick element to him, but a couple of those picks, good plays by the Bears nonetheless, but you get 4 turnovers from the Vikings. Josh Dobbs has probably his worst game of the season, and you muster up 12 points. You score 0 touchdowns in this game. And this is really Justin Fields auditioning for another team because the Bears are probably not going to keep him at this point. And you guys play like that when it matters more. Not 1, but 2 fourth quarter fumbles to almost lose this game. This game, neither team deserved to win it. The Bears win, good for them. I guess that's good for somebody, I guess. I guess that's good for whoever's a Bears fan, I guess. But 12-10, the ugliest game of the year.
Ugliest game of the year by far, but you have been recapped. We went over all of the games here. Make sure you stay tuned where we bring it all together. We're going to give you our top 5 teams so far this year. We're going to give you our top 5 worst teams, and we're also going to do a deep 5 on the playoff picture from here on out because after Thanksgiving, that's when the playoff push really matters here. So we're going to get deep into it, all the matchups that are possible, the records of teams, how likely they actually are to stay in the playoff mix or hunt here. So make sure you stay tuned for that, where we bring all of it together in our NFL preview for week 13.